Thank you for being here, and I've got to introduce our newest member, Representative Bobby Parham. He's with us today. And, great. How long have you been in the House, Bobby?
33 years.
33 years. We're glad you're with us. And down in Millersville, Georgia. I got a little commercial I got to say first. We need to keep Delta a Georgia company. Delta Airlines, so y'all fly Delta, fly it often. We got to save this Georgia-based company, and that's my commercial. We'll probably do it a couple more times before we get out of here today. But if we could move real quickly, and I apologize for starting late here, Mr. Skin Edge, if you could come forward and briefly describe the...
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, we have Dr. Brian Forsler with the University of Georgia, who's going to update the committee on the foremost termite project and the funding and what's going on and our needs for this year, if that'd be all right.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd add, while Dr. Forsler was coming forward, my wife was a flight attendant with Delta for 25 years, so I support you wholeheartedly.
Thank you. We'll continue to make those announcements.
Thank you.
Work very hard, fly Delta often.
The Edge household would appreciate it.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come here and express a gratitude and appreciation for the funding that we've had in the past from this committee, and hopefully demonstrate the value of that program and the need for continued funding of this project. The funding for this year is listed as $153,000 is actually spread between two programs at the University of Georgia within the Department of Entomology, the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences at the university. My extension counterpart, Dr. Dan Suter, couldn't be here, but I'm going to talk about some of the work that he's done and the research done through my program on this formosan termite problem. As you're well aware, this is a statewide problem now, and Georgia is the only state in the southeastern United States which doesn't have an established population of these things and hasn't thrown up their hands in frustration and just accepted the fact that it's inevitable. We don't think that it is. We clearly think we've demonstrated that it isn't. My extension counterpart, since his involvement when the funding first began on this project, has been able to educate the stakeholders within the state for the need to identify the problem and the sites where these termites are located. And we ran into a number of fears that we've had to overcome. Initially within the pest management community themselves, with fears of regulatory and legal entanglements, to the point when this termite, when it was first introduced or identified in this state, all the companies in the state listed this termite as an exclusion on their termite contracts for property owners. We think we've overcome some of that. In addition, there's also fear of property owners and the devaluation of their property values, which is a problem that's sort of worldwide. My colleagues in France, Italy, and Chile are facing the same problem with termites that we've actually introduced there from this country, but that's another story. The scope of the problem, through this education effort, we've understood that the scope is a little bit larger than we thought. In the last 5 years, we've tripled the number of known infestation sites, and these range across the state from 10 to 30 sites now. And Dr. Suter has fostered and grown the collaborative and cooperative relationships with the Georgia Department of Agriculture, the pest management industry, and pesticide manufacturers, which have all donated their time, products, and equipment to get this keep this program moving. From a research perspective, we have been able to identify the major source that's bringing this termite into the state, and it's actually the used railroad tie industry. These used railroad ties are used as landscape timbers. This came to their attention in a publication that we had about 4 years ago where we used some classic forensic techniques, including hitting the streets with the Department of Agriculture personnel to track down the vendors, and some DNA technology to identify that 10 sites scattered across Atlanta, the Atlanta metro area from Fayetteville to Suwanee, were actually brought here in a single shipment of used railroad ties from New Orleans, Louisiana. We have an extraordinary opportunity here in this state, because it is not well established, to actually document and demonstrate for the first time termite elimination or colony elimination, which we've been able to do at a number of sites using a variety of techniques and a variety of products. Through this work, we've been able to clearly demonstrate you can take isolated infestation that's been in place less than 10 years here in Georgia and successfully eliminate it. During the that process. We've also illuminated some of the mythology surrounding the marketing claims of some of the products used for this purpose, but that's an important part of a program like this, to educate the practitioners and the stakeholders like the property owners so that they have realistic expectations from any kind of management attempt, depending on what it is. So what we'd like to do with continued funding is to continue this educational effort with the stakeholders and include the landscape management industry, realtors, and builders, because these people are part of that community that are part of this problem. Aggressively pursue a compromise with the railroad tie industry, because their interest waxes and wanes in accordance with publicity around this. We've attempted and explored regulatory solutions with the Department of Agriculture, but from lessons from nearby states, we've determined that's really not a workable solution, and the best thing to do is to get the people involved to accept responsibility, be proactive, and we think the railroad tie industry can do this with a minimum of effort. We'd also like to demonstrate, finally, area-wide elimination of these infestations. We have sites identified over several acres in Columbus, Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia, and Savannah, where we intend to do this, and to use all of this work to write a blueprint that municipalities, homeowner associations, property management firms, or homeowners can use in the future to successfully implement and complete area-wide eradication and elimination programs. So with that, that's all that I had to. I know I was talking kind of fast, but you told us we had a little bit of time. So
Thank you. Any questions?
I got one.
Make it quick.
Yeah. How big are the infestations, the colonies?
it depends on how soon after we identify them from the time that they're introduced. Generally, they're brought in depending on the size of the number of railroad ties that are at a location. It may be in 2 or 3 of the railroad ties, and it'll take them 5 or 6 years to build up huge numbers. But where they're left unattended, and you can protect structures basically from these things for some time, but as their numbers grow, the problem, I guess the analogy that I like to use is the typical termite problem for a property owner in Georgia amounts to having a chihuahua chewing on your house. With Formosan termites, because of their introduced status, and I can spend 2 hours talking about why this happens. It's like having an elephant chew on your house. So it's about as close as you can get to what the IRS would call sudden and catastrophic damage. It can happen very, very fast with these large populations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Next is Student Finance Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon.
By the way, members, thank you for being here. This is a very important work that we're doing here, and I appreciate you all being here.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. We have 3 items in the amended budget. The committee will be pleased to know none of them involve additional state funds. On the handout that's being just sent around to, if I could direct your attention to page 3 of that handout. This is the one that looks like this. Thank you. Okay. First change has to do with the Hero Scholarship Program. For those of you not familiar, this is still a relatively new program that was created during the 2005 session. It was intended to provide scholarships to Georgia National Guard and Reserve personnel who have been deployed into a combat zone for a period of 181 consecutive days. As you can see, in the first year of the program in fiscal year 2006, we underexpended the funds available to us. By the way, there's a brochure in the booklet that we passed out to you on the HERO program. But since then, obviously, word has gotten around as it should. These folks are entitled to this benefit. And as you can see here, this far in this a year, we have been appropriated $200,000, and thus far have expended $487,000. And we expect probably by the end of the fiscal year, maybe another $250,000 or so. But we've been able to cover that additional expense through funds available to us from prior fiscal years. So we will perhaps need to come back in a year or two and ask for additional funds for the program, but right now we're able to cover all of the scholarships for these folks with funds already available to us. The next item on the next page is Hope Administration Program. You see there is an $841,000 addition through the amended budget, again, of other funds. And what these funds are intended to do, those of you who are acquainted with it, in the 2004 session, the General Assembly amended the HOPE law, And the principal change through that amendment to the Hope Law was to grant or authorize or direct, really, the Georgia Student Finance Commission to undertake the responsibility for calculating all the Hope grade point averages for graduating seniors. Historically, that's been done by the high schools. So we are in the process of doing that. That becomes effective this spring. We anticipate thousands upon thousands of phone calls from those folks who are wondering about how their child's grade point average was calculated. And so in order to ensure that we can provide timely and accurate response to those calls as they come in, we are setting up a temporary call center with funds available to us simply to ensure that we're providing good customer service to those people when they do call and want to walk through the calculations of how that grade point average was calculated. The third item on the next page, on page 5, this involves two fairly minor reductions to the Hope Grant and to the Hope Public Scholarship Program, totaling about $7 million, $7.6 million. And these funds are being transferred from our budget to the Department of Early Childhood, Early Care, and Learning in order to create additional 1,586 early pre-K slots for that department. And I can assure you that no one who is entitled to either the Hope Scholarship or the Hope Grant will be hurt as a result of that change. We have the extra funds in our budget this year.
Any questions? Let's push it back, please. Representative O'Neill.
Afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon.
It's a pleasure, actually an honor to see you.
Thank you. It's always wonderful seeing you as well.
What'd you say?
I have a question in a minute, but I wanted to sincerely thank you for your administration of the HEROES program. I don't think there's any calling greater than to honor those men and women who actually stake their lives for our lives and our freedom, and to give them an opportunity to better their lives when they return from combat, because they have made ours so much better.
Absolutely.
It was certainly very important to this General Assembly in 2005, and it still is. And I want to laud you for making that all even better than the legislation was.
Thank you.
In your department, you've done an outstanding job. And I hope you need way more money than we can.
I hope so, too.
And I hope we'll keep getting it to you when you need it.
Thank you very much. Just one point of interest, the young man pictured on the front of that brochure is an employee of the Georgia Student Finance Commission who did come back from Iraq.
On the early learning initiative situation, I understand in the supplemental we're going to fund 1,586 new slots. I think I saw in the 08 general 3,000 new slots.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
My question is, though, I heard from some people in the industry, some folks that are in the child care and child early learning initiative business out there in the private sector, that told me that since 1999 or something that they haven't had any increase in the funding that goes to them that has to do with general infrastructure and their teachers and stuff like that. And the comment was made, we really could use a few less slots and a little more of the undergirding money. Has that issue been brought to light to you and your department, or is that something you've already deliberated about and decided maybe it didn't have, that complaint didn't have merit or whatever?
Well, that particular issue would not be one that would be before the Georgia Student Finance Commission. I'm certainly aware of the issue from my prior days at the Office of Planning and Budget, but the decision on whether to create slots or provide for additional salary increases or operating expenses for the child care centers would not be one that be our responsibility. So I'm sorry I can't respond to your question.
Whose would that be?
Pardon me?
Whose would that be?
That would be Marshall Moore.
Representative Earhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess not. Commissioner, I want to ask you, I'm trying to find in your budget request for 2008 the anticipated monies. I understand your department participated in a study this summer with respect to the Hope Grant and the dual enrollment children. It was a $65,000 estimate for that. Are you anticipating that? As you know, or probably should know, the House and the Senate are probably going to commit serious dollars to those career academies this year. The dual enrollment, which we're also you'll probably see a bill on that this year, is crucial to their success. Are you anticipating that $65,000 in your HOPE grant?
If the statutory change is done with respect to dual enrollment, the incremental impact, as you said, $65,000 is pretty de minimis and certainly can be easily accommodated within the budget we have.
Are you comfortable with the $65,000 estimate?
We have had numerous conversations with the Department of Technical and Adult Education. I think we're in agreement with them that, one, it is difficult to derive a precise cost estimate, but two, that whatever the cost would be if that change were made, it would be fairly minimal. So it would be within that range up to maybe a couple $100,000. So within the context of HOPE, it's a pretty small number.
Thank you, sir. That's what I wanted to know.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any other questions from the members? And we'll have you back for the big budget.
I look forward to it.
About a week and a half from now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Who's next? Where's the next? Georgia Research Alliance, Mike Cassidy. Look forward to hearing your comments. And
along some handouts. Let me just pass these down here. And, try to work try to work from these comments. Should be enough for everybody.
we got to move. Just give me the quick here.
Let me start out by thanking you for your long-standing support of the Georgia Research Alliance. Chairman Smith asked me to talk with you just for a little bit today about really the role of the Research Alliance. For those of you that are less familiar, but there's an awful lot of familiar faces on this committee, and I've been in front of you for many years, but talk about our role, the impact of some of our current investments, and a little bit about a new initiative that we're working on with the governor, and he's recommended funding for that in his budget, and I want to tell you some of the details of that, and then just give you a quick, very quick rundown on what our fiscal 08 budget looks like, and I know we'll probably have an opportunity to talk about that in more detail. But if you just look at this handout, and I'm going to try to go through this rather quickly, being sensitive to your time. What I really wanted to help you to understand is how GRA fits into the state's apparatus for economic development. You know, there's different strategies for economic development in the state. There's strategies that help us to recruit large industry that are big employers, and there's strategies to think about future kinds of employment based on future kinds of businesses that are often rooted in science and technology, which means they're often rooted in our universities. Georgia needs to do both of these things, and I think we do them both very effectively. When you think about the Georgia Research Alliance, you should think about that latter strategy, that of thinking about advancing new kinds of industries, advancing new kinds of jobs, pulling ideas out of our research universities and converting those ideas into the beginnings of new companies that we hope will grow and in time become major Georgia employers. There's three things that the Georgia Research Alliance does working in partnership with you to help on that strategy of growing new kinds of opportunities. I think all of you are familiar with our Eminent Scholar program. That's very much the centerpiece of what we do at the Research Alliance. We help our universities, of which there are 6, to go out and recruit world-class scientists, specialists in particular fields, world-class investigators in particular fields. And we work with our universities to bring them here to Georgia, where the results of their research can be the basis for these new kinds of opportunities and new kinds of industries in Georgia. That's the second part. We spend a lot of time working with these individuals and others on the research campuses to build new businesses around the results of research. And so I'll give you a few examples in a little bit about some of the companies that we work with. But today there's over 50 companies that have been created around the results of research in about the last 4 years. And then finally, we do a lot of brokering between our universities and industry in the state. As much as we're interested in building new companies and new jobs around the results of research, there's a lot of industry in the state that we think needs to benefit from the investments that you're making in helping us build the capabilities of our research universities. So we do have programs and activities that work toward matchmaking between needs of industry and what's happening with research in the universities, and then encouraging those kinds of partnerships to take place. Let me talk a little bit about the overall impact. And again, I talked first about the eminent scholars, and that's the piece I really want to brag about, because that's central to our whole program, and it's central to the theme of what we're trying to do. On the right side of the top sheet, there's just a few examples here of some eminent scholars that we've recruited. There's important things that happen when we bring them into the state. The first example is an example of one that brought a lot of money into the state. Dr. Jin Shi, who joined us a few years ago at the Medical College of Georgia. We worked with MCG to recruit him from Florida. When he came to Georgia, he brought with him 2 trailer loads of tissue samples of important cancer tumors. He brought with him a couple of dozen junior scientists, and he brought with him $10 million in federal funding. And year over year since arriving here, he has generated another $4 to $8 million every year through a competitive process of going after large grants from the federal government. And it's these large grants, funding from NIH, National Cancer Institutes, National Science Foundation. This is the lifeblood of the research enterprise that we call our research universities. The state does not fund research for the most part. We ask you to fund the critical infrastructure that's needed and the endowments to bring the people here who make everything else happen through an age-old competitive process with the federal government. And we're doing great. I talked about Jin Shi bringing new money. Another result is they build companies. The second one, Dr. Clifton Bale, some of you have met over at the University of Georgia. Cliff's interesting. We recruited him about a decade ago from Monsanto, which is where he had spent most of his career. So he came in with more of a business mindset, and in 10 years, Cliff has created 7 new companies, all based out of research at the University of Georgia. The latest one is called Insectigen, and they're working on biologically friendly pesticides. Tremendous markets, very exciting work. Venture capital-backed company, professional management already in place, and we think Insectigen is going to be a big success. These scholars, when they come in, they also choose to accomplish really incredible things. The third example, Dr. Rafi Ahmed, we helped recruit to Emory University a little more than a decade ago. Georgia wasn't even on his mind when he was leading vaccine research at UCLA in California. But working with Emory, we brought him into the state. He established the Emory Vaccine Development Center in collaboration with several of our other institutions. Last year alone, now just 1 year, Rafi and his team of about 50 scientists generated over $50 million of federal funding and private sector funding from foundations. Their center is the recipient of 2 large Gates Foundation awards, but the bulk of their funding is coming from the federal government. But what's even more interesting is Rafi's team discovered a new vaccine for HIV/AIDS, and a company was formed here in Georgia, GeoVax, led by a guy that some of you may know, Don Hildebrand, who was formerly the CEO of the company now called Mariel, based in Georgia. Don now is leading that company through the first stage of clinical trials for an AIDS vaccine. And then finally, one new addition we just announced last week, the last one at the bottom, Sam Gandy at Emory University. Sam is a specialist in Alzheimer's disease. He and his team, while in Pennsylvania, discovered a new class of compounds that slows the progression of Alzheimer's. He's coming to Georgia, though, to work on a new vaccine for Alzheimer's. If you read or if you're familiar with Alzheimer's, a lot of the cases are caused by buildup of what's called amyloid plaque. It's this gooey substance that clogs up the brain. And they think they have a strategy through a vaccine application to offset that kind of buildup of plaque. So wouldn't it be amazing if in another 5, 6, 7 years, if Georgia was known as the place that invented and commercialized a vaccine for AIDS, and invented and commercialized a vaccine for Alzheimer's. These are the kinds of things that we think we have the potential of helping to happen by bringing in this top talent. But you could take any one of these individuals and multiply it by 50, because there are today 54 of these eminent scholars among what we call our academy, working across our 6 universities on these kinds of discoveries, bringing this kind of funding into the state, and building these kinds of companies. So quickly look at page 2. I want to give you a quick thumbnail sketch of what we've done with funding in the current fiscal year 2007. As I've talked about, our eminent scholars are providing tremendous leverage through public, private, and federal sources. Every time you make an endowment possible to one of these scholars, we're matching your funds with dollar for dollar funding at the particular university. You all put up $750,000 for each one of these endowments. The university, in each case that we work with, they'll go to the private sector through their foundation and raise that matching amount. So immediately you're getting dollar for dollar leverage of your investment. Importantly, that investment is a permanent investment. It goes into a permanent endowment, and only the income that's associated with that endowment is what's used to support the work of that scholar. So we now have 54 permanent endowments in place in our universities that for generations to come will continue to provide this kind of impact. But we need to do more because there are more people that we need to bring to Georgia as the trigger for this whole system. We talked about research infrastructure. A lot of the funding that we'll talk about is within capital outlay, and that goes to providing very specialized equipment in the university laboratories, one-of-a-kind instrumentation that our investigators cannot use their federal grants for. But bringing the right people into the state and giving them the best tools or the best assets, it's a fairly standard business model. You have the right people, the right assets, and they'll produce the revenue. And that's how this system works. We bring in the people, we give them all of the best tools to let them build highly competitive laboratories, and they will generate the revenue, either from federal sources or corporate. Today, we can boast 18 National Centers of Research Excellence across the 6 universities that we work with. National Centers of Excellence is a little bit of an arbitrary definition, but they are large-scale, comprehensive, usually interinstitutional, many universities involved in them. They generate $20 to $30 million in grant income. What we have found through several years of study is it's these large, very comprehensive, well-funded centers that generate a disproportionate amount of intellectual property. And of course, that's what we're trying to do, is generate new ideas in the form of intellectual property that will be commercialized as new businesses in the universities. And so we've put a premium, working with our universities, on trying to focus our effort around going after these large-scale centers. And we've had a good deal of success in the face of shrinking budgets in Washington for basic research. And then finally, the industry partnerships and commercialization. The whole idea is to bring new products into the market. As I mentioned, just in the last 4 years or so, 50 new companies have been formed around the research results of our eminent scholars and their teams across the campuses. We have a program called Venture Lab that you all fund that helps us to move the beginnings of those companies through many, many stages. Chairman Smith's well aware of some of the challenges for our high-tech companies in securing venture capital. And what Venture Lab does is 2 things. It plugs some of those holes in what otherwise is a somewhat dysfunctional marketplace for venture capital, but more importantly, it helps us associate entrepreneurial talent with the scientific talent. I hope I wouldn't surprise you if I told you that most scientists do not make good business managers. And so through Venture Lab, what we do is we identify what you would call a serial entrepreneur, an individual that's been successful in a couple of startups who is now in the mode of looking for the next opportunity. And we seek these people out just like we seek out our eminent scholars. We bring them in, we provide a stipend, we give them rights to walk around in specific laboratories on the campuses, and we do the matchmaking so that you get business expertise teamed up with scientific expertise. And when you can do that and do it right, good things happen. There's a snapshot in the lower right corner just of how a total of about $31 million that you all authorized this current year is invested. About a quarter of it goes into the eminent scholars and the programs around those scholars. About another quarter of it goes into these industry partnerships and Venture Lab. And about half of it goes into research infrastructure, and that's in the form of capital outlay. Now, the next challenge is to figure out how to take what we have done and really take it to a whole new level of opportunity for the state. Our Board of Trustees, which includes the CEOs of many of Georgia's largest companies, the presidents of our 6 universities, and others, 2 years ago asked ourselves a question. Is there an area of research and development that with appropriate investment we could move Georgia to the level of being recognized globally as being one of the top places? Because we're convinced that investments in R&D do in turn spawn all of these other opportunities. So if we want to distinguish ourselves from everybody else that today has that same kind of a strategy, we feel strongly about choosing an area where we could be known as the best. So we did very intensive study over the past year. We've shared our ideas with the governor, and in his budget recommendation is a new line of $10 million for what we're calling our Life Sciences Vaccine Initiative. vaccine development, antiviral development, this is an area that is very large from a market standpoint, and it turns out we've got very considerable strengths across our universities. Now, most of us here, when we hear the word vaccine, we think about childhood vaccines that all of us had for polio or smallpox or mumps and measles. While those are very, very important, they aren't really big business markets. There's only a few manufacturers, only a few companies. It's not an area that Georgia is likely to excel in. But what's happening in medicine today, I referenced when I talked about Sam Gandy, who's just joined us. Vaccine strategies for chronic disease are the next big thing. I think Dan Ron will talk a little bit about this later this afternoon when you hear from him in the context of how they'll operationalize this new program at the medical college. Dan's been very close to helping us develop this strategy, but it does represent a tremendous market. The thought of being able to attack diseases like Alzheimer's or many cancers or other autoimmune diseases with vaccine strategies is truly remarkable, and we're just seeing, in fact, this summer, Merck announced distribution of Gardasil, a vaccine for human papillomavirus, which is the cause of cervical cancer. And there are other trials underway now for other cancers. And we believe that with the considerable expertise that we already have across our universities, the fact that we have the CDC here and other big distribution agencies like CARE or the Carter Center, we have a lot of the assets in place where we could claim ownership of being one of the world's leaders in this particular area. We think there's big business opportunities to create a whole new kind of company that commercializes really a next generation of vaccine. We think it's the right kind of thing to do to have a major impact, not just on Georgians' lives, but on the population as a whole. So as we have time, we'll look forward to talking with you more about this initiative, and I'll answer any questions you have on it today. Finally, if you just go to page 4, now I'm still working from the governor's budget book, but in the regent's budget, in an area called Research Consortium, which in the governor's budget was page 286, I think. Now, are you working from a different page number? But you have the Regents tracking document in front of you. Okay. There's just a couple of line items that really refer to the Georgia Research Alliance that are in Research Consortium. One, of course, current funds, continuation. While you can't see it directly there, there's about $12 million of cash in current funds that's proposed as continuation. There's a couple of changes that are noted. One says redirect funding to venture lab and GRA commercialization programs. Yes. We were prepared this past year to recommend to the governor additional investment in our venture lab program because of its success. There were a few other areas that we were also looking at discontinuing, and we resolved this with OPB merely by redirecting some funding from some lower priority areas of our program to new higher priority areas. So that's really no change. And then there's the $10 million line item that adds the new life science vaccine research program. And then finally, back in your capital outlay budget, there's a total of $19 million. That $19 million is outlined at a high level for you on page 5 of my handout. It goes toward what we would call startup packages for the eminent scholars that we're recruiting, and then a variety of these national centers of excellence that I talked with you about, where we commit cost sharing to those centers in the form of new infrastructure to help build those laboratories. You can see on the right side of page 5 the kind of leverage that's involved. And again, these are federal funds, principally from NIH, National Institutes of Health, and National Science Foundation, but these are not insignificant amounts of money that are now flowing into Georgia as a result of our commitments to recruit the right people and give them the right tools. All of this has an economic impact. We could have an economist up here and he could talk about multipliers, and everybody has their own view of that. But at the end of the day, this $142 million of grants is going to pay salaries, to buy goods and services. It's checks that are being written in the communities where our universities are based. So I would suggest that that alone is tremendous impact. But the thought of doing the kinds of things that our scholars are doing toward leading new discoveries, bringing them into commercial enterprise, it's all very, very exciting. Again, I think you all need to take credit for your continued willingness to sustain this operation. The Research Alliance has been in business since 1990. We are almost one of a kind in the country. Every other state almost is now trying to copy what we're doing. Louisiana has just launched the Louisiana Research Alliance. I don't think they can do it the same way we've done it because they don't have, I think, the wisdom that we see here and the business leadership that's involved in our group. But it is a very good model. This business of the public sector and the private sector working together has served us extremely well. But we very much appreciate your continued support, and I'll answer your questions, or I'll look forward to visiting with you in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy, and we'd like to welcome Chairman Harbin to our meeting, and glad you're with us. Some very, very interesting subjects that we hear as a result of attending these meetings, and we appreciate your support. Thank you for being here too, Mr. Cassidy. First question up is, and we need to move pretty quickly because I know there's going to be a lot of questions here, but if we could try to hold, because I've got a lot of people that we need to see today. If we could go to a couple of questions, and I'll have him back in here in 2 weeks. What do you say? All right, number 7. Who's number 7?
Thank you.
That's Representative O'Neill.
I'm curious, when your alliance develops this intellectual property, I would assume there's some process where you might seek patents or copyrights or whatever. How is it determined, or what determines how that intellectual property is distributed from government or quasi-governmental organizations into private enterprise? And is the method such that it should favor Georgia job creations and Georgians rather than maybe somebody in China or whatever?
Two important questions. One, with regard to our 4 public member universities, Georgia Tech, University of Georgia, Georgia State Medical College, all of that process is governed on that specific campus under rules and regulations established by Board of Regents, and I think even in statute. So ultimately the Board of Regents is responsible for the management of all intellectual property and in discovery on a university campus. So that's managed locally on each campus. We don't get into that. In the case of Emory and Clark Atlanta University, our 2 private institutions, they follow similar processes and procedures in terms of distribution of royalties to the inventor, to the school itself, and how it's licensed to industry. The second part of your question, 10 years ago, I would have said there's not much differentiation. Schools are either going to license something out to a company in California, or if the deal looks really good here in Georgia, they'll try to do it with the Georgia company. That has changed significantly. And I would say that one of the intangible results of the Research Alliance has been changes in culture in a lot of different ways, and that's one. Where today we do see more of a preference with the universities when they can, and when it makes business sense, to try to do that deal with a new Georgia enterprise. Now, there are some drug developments, for instance, that are only going to get licensed off to a Glaxo or another large company somewhere because we're trying to get that drug into the marketplace. But increasingly, now we have opportunities to keep those inventions in-state, build them into companies that are being launched in-state, and I think each of our institutions are showing a preference toward trying to do that. It's more of an awareness that that is a responsibility because they're getting funded from an economic development mechanism. So I think it's improving greatly. There's always room to optimize that, and we're looking at that now.
Thank you. We're going to hold the questions off and have you back in a couple of weeks for 20, 30 minutes because this is an extremely exciting topic that you work with on a daily basis. So thank you for coming. And
Chairman, as you know, I'm willing to come see anybody one-on-one if there's ever a question that we can better address that way. But thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
I'm going to leave copies of our latest annual report just up here on the table for you all for later. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is North Georgia College and State University. Hey. Glad you're here with us.
Thanks for this opportunity. I'm David Potter, president of the college, and want to take this chance to really express our appreciation for what you've already done with this project we're talking about today. This is our new library and technology building, and you've already invested considerable in the design and construction of this facility, $20.5 million to date. This building will replace our current library, which was built 35 years ago. And since 1972, when it was built, our university's enrollment has increased 500%, from 1,000 students to 5,000 students. So it's a very timely building for us in the history of our university. Of course, in those 35 years, libraries have changed dramatically as well. What used to be a local repository for texts now provides access to materials throughout the University System of Georgia and well beyond that. What used to be a focus on printed materials now involves information resources in many electronic formats. What used to be a local interaction with other patrons in the facility now provides a portal to contacts with people throughout the world and knowledge throughout the world. And what used to be a place of much isolated study is now really a collaborative learning environment. We see this resource not only as a university resource, but as a great asset for our community as well, and we plan to use it in partnership with our community. And this $2 million request really will complete this learning environment and will really make this building the center for learning and for interaction on our campus. And we appreciate the chance to ask you for this request. Thank you, sir.
Any questions? Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're helping us make up a little time here, Doctor. Next is Dr. Ron with the Medical College of Georgia. Thank you for coming, sir. I'm sure Chairman Harbin has a great interest in your comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We've got some handouts here just to distribute, so I'll give them just a second. Maybe I'll just also amplify a little bit on Mike Cassidy's answer regarding intellectual property. Federal grant recipients are also governed by legislation called the Bayh-Dole Act, which really stipulates the ways in which faculty inventors can or cannot participate in commercialization of discoveries associated with research done with federal funding. And our universities, by and large, adhere to the guidelines of the Bayh-Dole Act in that our faculty are kind of part of a faculty common market, and so that's the way in which they would be able to participate in commercialization of discovery were they in other state universities and other locations. So we'd be happy, again, we can provide you with what those guidelines are. Well, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you today. I received some instructions that focus this predominantly on our research enterprise. I would like to take the opportunity to introduce you to a brief overview of some of our ongoing academic activities and some of our academic successes as well as our research successes. The Medical College of Georgia is a component of an academic health center, along with the practice plans of our faculty and our clinical delivery system under the management and administration of MCG Health Incorporated. We collectively comprise what's called an academic health center. And an academic health center, each one is structured a little differently. There are 120 or so in the nation. A definition developed by the Institute of Medicine is on the first page of my talk here. It's defined as the constellation of functions and organizations committed to improving the health of patients and populations through the integration of their roles in research, education, and patient care to produce the knowledge and evidence base that becomes the foundation for treating illness and improving health. So we're in the knowledge business, but we're also in the health business. And so we are a unit of the university system, we're the only college or university in the state that's devoted exclusively to health. And we summarize our mission for our own working purposes on the next page here as that we exist to improve health and reduce the burden of illness in society by discovering, disseminating, and applying knowledge of human health and disease. The discovery of process, of course, occurs through our researchers, the dissemination of knowledge through our academic programs and preparing the health professionals of the future, and our application of knowledge is really through our treating of individuals with patients and with conditions that are not readily treatable by community settings and by bringing innovation to the care of patients. And we believe that integrating these functions really adds value to each one of them. On the MCG campus now, there are more than 50 different academic programs across 5 schools: medicine, dentistry, nursing, allied health sciences, and graduate studies. Our entry-level programs are at the baccalaureate level. We don't offer any degrees below the baccalaureate level. We have no freshmen and sophomores on our campus. Our baccalaureate programs have entry points in the 3rd year of undergraduate school. And then we have our doctoral programs and our advanced degree programs. In addition to the 50 different academic programs, we have 50 different graduate medical and dental residency programs. We have 100 different accredited programs that we're managing. We have some examples of recently approved programs here. Our role is in many ways not just to produce the practitioners of the future, but to produce the faculty and the leaders of the future. And as many of you know, some of the bottlenecks in addressing the health professions workforce right now have to do with numbers of faculty. This is particularly an issue in the nursing profession. And I've listed doctoral degrees here in genomic medicine, nursing practice, physical therapy, and neuroscience, and masters in public health, master of science in biostatistics as some of our recent additions to our programmatic array. Applications to our institution have been going up dramatically, 31% since 2001. Last year we had 4,000 applications for 800 positions across all of our programs and our 5 schools. Residency applications are separate from this. So these are just the graduate programs, undergraduate programs. Enrollment has increased 15% since the fall of 2001. Our retention really is off the scale in comparison with our sister institutions in the university system, and it should be, because we don't have the freshmen and sophomores. But and so many of our programs are entering at the doctoral degree level. 94.9% first year retention rate, graduation rate 92%. Institution-wide, 90% of our students are from the state of Georgia. In the dental school, we only accept applications from Georgia. In the medical school, we generally have 2 students or 3 students at most from out of state. Of the historically 180 students per year, last year we went up to 190. So that's about 98, 99% from the state of Georgia. More than 90% of our new graduates pass their licensure and or certification exam on the first try. 60% of our graduates whose whereabouts we know and who are in professional practice of one type or another are in the state in practice. More than 80% of the dental school graduates are in this state. And I've provided you just with some trends for applications and enrollment over the past 5 years on the academic metrics slide. Some academic success stories. There are all kinds of different beauty pageants and contests for rankings, and I've listed a few of them on here. I think that it's important for us to state that we do offer some programs that aren't offered anywhere else in the state. And we also offer some programs of which there are only a few nationally, like the Clinical Nurse Leader Program, Medical Illustration Program, Doctor of Nursing Practice Program, etc. We are consistently lauded for excellence by our peers, our governing bodies, external evaluators. In the School of Medicine, 16 MCG physicians were named among America's top doctors. That's the top 1% of physicians in the United States. We're characterized by having true excellence in the faculty. On the basic science side, our PhD researchers were second among the nation's academic health centers in research grants per basic science faculty member. Doesn't mean that we have the largest research enterprise. We're relatively small in terms of total number of faculty for the size of our educational enterprise. Some educational examples of collaboration. Our undergraduate nursing programs, MCG programs, are offered at Columbus State and Gordon College. Medical technology and nuclear medicine programs are offered through Georgia Gwinnett College. A Doctor of Nursing Practice program, launched last year with the assistance of a grant from the Woodruff Foundation, is offered not only on the MCG campus but at 8 other university system institutions. We have a branch of the School of Nursing that's been in operation for almost 30 years in Athens. The Doctor of Physical Therapy program is offered at MCG. It's also offered through North Georgia College and State University and Armstrong Atlantic University. The University of Georgia Pharmacy program places students on our campus. And as you know, we have a proposal in this year to expand the MCG School of Medicine in collaboration with the University of Georgia in Athens. We're also expanding the MCG School of Medicine through clinical programs for 3rd and 4th year students in southwest Georgia, in Albany, and also in southeast Georgia, in Savannah. And I'll be happy to answer any questions or talk more about those, but I've understood I'm supposed to focus mainly on research here today, so I'll turn to that. Our research is organized thematically. We're emphasizing really 5 major diseases: neurologic diseases, cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and conditions involving infection and inflammation. These conditions turn out to be the illnesses that have the biggest burden of chronic disease in the state of Georgia and in the nation, and there are areas in which we have particular strength. We've listed what the active research funding was by area on the slide that says thematic funding. You can see where it was in 01 and where it was in 06. So for cancer, went from $3 million to $9.5 million, cardiovascular from 6.6 to 21, etc. And we've listed the 5-year growth. We need to do this. In order to be competitive in the research arena, you must be among the top 10%, nationally, internationally. Without that, you can't sustain funding. It's the secret to the success of the Georgia Research Alliance. It's the secret to the success that we've had on our campus, which is thematic focus. We currently have $64 million in active research grants, up from $34 million in 2001, an 87% increase. We have 505 active grants. There were 316 in 2001. NIH funding represents 70% of our current funding. The NIH funding environment is very difficult right now. As an example, the funding level in most institutes is less than 10%. You may have heard this from previous speakers. That means, and in general, about 50% of grants submitted are triaged. They're not reviewed. They're considered not competitive enough to even be reviewed. Of those that are reviewed, only about 10% get funded. So it's a very, very tight funding environment. In order to be competitive and sustain extramural research funding, you have to have focus. Our tech transfer metrics over the last 5 years, we've had 135 invention disclosures, 114 patent applications, 25 patents yielded, 33 agreements, $1.3 million in intellectual property revenue. This is not a major component of our contribution at this time. It is growing steadily, and it will grow as the depth and breadth of our research grows. We have 8 GRA eminent scholars who have 33 active grants. Their total active research funding is $34 million, $8 million for this year alone. So most of those grants are multi-year grants. This, again, is a key to the success. The largest grant in MCG history was recently received, a $15 million grant focusing on diabetes using an animal model. This grant involves 13 investigators from different institutions. Our GRA eminent scholars not only are successful as individual investigators in running their own labs, but also in running centers and institutes. So we develop areas of focus around them. And on the eminent scholar slide here, I've listed that GRA eminent scholars at MCG are center or institute directors of our Institute of Molecular Medicine and Genetics, the Institute of Neuroscience, Cancer Center, Center for Biotechnology and Genomic Medicine, Dr. Shi, whom Mr. Cassidy referred to earlier, the Immunotherapy Center focusing on immunotherapy and cancer, and our Center for Telehealth. So what we do is we develop around them, around individuals of international stature, we develop centers which then leads to further funding. So the research funding that I've listed here are the research grants held by the individuals. In addition to that are the research grants held by individuals who work in their centers. For instance, the $15 million diabetes grant that I referred to is held by Dr. McIndoe, who works in Dr. Shi's center. He came here because of Dr. Shi. We currently have 15 funded extramural grants with sister institutions, 9 involving MCG faculty as co-investigators and 6 as principal investigators. Most recent example is an NIH Nanomedicine Development Center in collaboration with Georgia Tech and Emory. This is a $10 million grant. This would not have happened without the GRA and without the strength, without the technological strength that exists at Georgia Tech and a scientific foundation that's the area of focus of Bill Dinan, the GRA eminent scholar, who is the participant in this as a co-investigator from MCG. We're increasingly focusing on translating science into clinical relevance. The focus here is on clinical and translational research. We're exploring collaboration there with both Georgia State and the University of Georgia. Some major initiatives for us. Expanding the health professions workforce. There are very significant shortages of health professionals in many disciplines at the present time. I chaired a university system task force to analyze the projected needs in the years ahead that reported back to the Board of Regents last June. We have existing shortages in nursing and a number of allied health professionals, in mental health professionals, in some areas in pharmacists, dentists, and increasingly among physicians. Another major initiative for us is the development of the Cancer Center. We do receive strategic funding through the Georgia Cancer Coalition to assist with that. That's a critical component of the GCC strategy. That's also critical to our mission and purpose as the state's public health sciences university. We're launching a program in regenerative medicine, building on strength that exists at Georgia Tech. And as I said, we're focusing on translating science through a Clinical and Translational Science Award. We recently received a Clinical and Translational Science Award from the NIH, a planning grant. And then participation in the GRA Big Bang Initiative. And I'd like to take just a moment to focus on that if I can. The focus of this is on immune therapies, vaccine development, but also immune therapy. And the intent here is to manipulate the body's immune system in a way that has impact on both infectious diseases in the way that we're used to and accustomed to thinking of vaccines, but also modify the course of chronic diseases that now comprise the major disease burden in the developed world and 75% of expenditures in the U.S. health system. We need to we need to stimulate the immune system in advance of exposure to an infectious agent. We're used to that. Measles, mumps, vaccines, childhood vaccinations. But then there are infectious diseases like AIDS, HIV, and you heard about Dr. Ahmed's work, where for some reason the immune system doesn't adequately respond. So we need new strategies for infectious diseases that become chronic in nature like HIV. Then there are diseases where the immune system is overactive that lead to chronic disease, like diabetes or rheumatoid arthritis, where we have continuous activity of the immune system targeted against certain aspects of that disease. And dampening the immune response in that circumstance, or identifying who's at risk genetically for acquiring those diseases and how to modify that risk, also involves immunotherapy. Then there's modulating the immune system to protect against adverse effects while also blocking foreign tissue, like transplant rejection. That's another way in which we need to learn how to better modulate the immune system. And then finally, there's cancer. In cancer, in many people, there are specific deficits in the immune system that allow abnormal cells to implant and then grow and spread. So there the issue is how to stimulate the immune system adequately to overcome tolerance. And that's one of the focuses. In our case, we are focused on immunotherapeutic approaches to diabetes and to cancer in particular. But it's also key in neurologic diseases, degenerative neurologic diseases like Alzheimer's disease and multiple sclerosis. And it's also important in the emerging burden of chronic infectious diseases. This area of focus is an area where there's a lot of strength in this state. We have the CDC. We have tremendous strength at Emory. We have our areas of focus and strength. We have the ability to really become world leaders in this area, which is why this has been chosen as an area of focus by the Georgia Research Alliance. We also believe that this is a key area scientifically, that there is a tremendous opportunity, that we have the tools available through genetics, genomics, epigenetics, to be able to identify how to intervene. And finally, some opportunities. We were asked about salaries. Mr. Chairman asked us to comment on that. We lag behind national salary means for faculty in the School of Nursing, in the School of Medicine. We exceed the mean in School of Dentistry through a concerted effort, and in Allied Health Sciences, we've reached the mean by specifically focusing on that. Salary issues are key. We expect people to produce at the 75th percentile. We've got to be able to enable them to secure competitive salaries. We also enjoy, however, an excellent quality of life in this state, and in Augusta we enjoy a lower than national average cost of living, which is a real attraction for us. So that helps us. But we've got to compete on the national stage, and we've got to expect performance, and that's an issue for us. It's just a challenge for us. As MCG, we're connected to our healthcare system. 40% of School of Medicine budgets nationally, ours among them, comes from the clinical side. So issues that impact on clinical funding impact on us academically. All of these parts are interconnected, and we just need to be transparent and working collaboratively so that we understand what our accountability is and what our needs are. We have a significant direct economic impact and indirect economic impact. I've cheated a little bit and used the economic multipliers. If I list economic impact without that, the direct budgetary economic impact of MCG and the MCG health system is about $900 million on an annual basis. 1/4 of our operating budget comes from the state appropriation. The other 3/4 comes from clinical service, extramural grants and contracts, foundations, endowment, and tuition. And in our case, tuition represents a very small component because of the relatively small number of students to the size of our operation. We are the 13th, we're proud of this, we're the 13th least expensive school of medicine in the country of 125 or 26 schools of medicine. That's a good thing. We want to keep it there. But we've got financial challenges to deal with it as well. Above all, we're here for the purpose of improving health. We have lots of different things that we do and endeavors that we're involved in. I like to refer back to a quote of Thomas Jefferson, who said, "Without health, there's no happiness. Attention to health, comma, MCG, then should take place of every other object." Well, I thank you for the time, and I'll certainly be happy to answer any questions. And I too, will make myself available one-on-one or in any kinds of circumstances.
Thank you, Dr. Ron. And I'd like to invite you and hope that you'll participate in something that we're working toward where you can tell the people of Georgia about the wonderful things that you and the other research universities are doing. We're trying to set up a meeting in the appropriations room in the Capitol with all 4 of you research presidents, as well as Mr. Cassidy with the Georgia Research Alliance, and Representative Bill Henry, who's the chairman of the Higher Education, is going to moderate this, where you get 5 to 10 minutes to tell your story, and then we'll leave an hour for questions and answers. Because if you'd have been here yesterday when Dr. Clough was here, it was, to say the least, quite exciting. So I hope that you'll participate, and Mr. Tom Daniel is going to work with you and coordinate this.
If you invite, I will come.
Thank you. Who's number 14? Chairman Harvin. You're up, sir. Number 6. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Harvin.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. Dr. Ron, thank you. I appreciate your being here. I really just want to thank you for what you do for not just Augusta, but for the state. I mean, I think that MCG is really an underappreciated asset for the state with what you do with the research. I appreciate all that you do. I think because you're not here in Metro Atlanta, sometimes you may be overlooked a little, and hopefully we're going to rectify that in the near future. But I did want to ask you a couple of questions on the research, the vaccine research we're doing. VHR has asked for, I believe it's about $16 million for the pandemic flu vaccine. The research that we're doing with the collaboration is with Georgia Tech and Emory, I believe. Is that correct?
Our vaccine.
The vaccine research, is that with Georgia?
Well, the focus on vaccines, I mean, there's animal vaccine research that goes on at University of Georgia. There's vaccine research that goes on at Emory. We do it, and also Georgia Tech.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, we're getting a lot of questions about this $16 million for the pandemic flu. About, is this truly an effective vaccine? Is this what we need? Where we need to focus the money, or is something better coming fairly quickly? And I guess that's what I'm asking. Are we seeing dramatic improvements in our vaccines? Are we seeing something that will come down on the pandemic flu area especially that would probably be better, a wiser expenditure of our money?
Well, I'm going to give a disclaimer here. You know, I used to be one of America's top doctors. They had the wisdom to take me off that list. I'm now an administrator. So, you know, the issue, the specific issue, so I would, you know, I really would urge that we get really the right people here to answer this question. But my perspective is that with the risk of pandemic flu is if there is an influenza epidemic that comes from a flu type that is not the usual and customary route. We all receive flu vaccine that is comprised of components of the most recent influenza A and influenza B serotypes. If there is a wild type, for instance, avian flu, that undergoes a genetic change and now becomes transmissible easily from person to person, then that we would not have built up immunity within the community in the way that happens under ordinary circumstances. So the issue for preparedness is to have anti-influenza medication available, Tamiflu, in adequate amounts, and then also have the infrastructure in place to rapidly produce a new flu vaccine based upon that specific isolate. and that requires infrastructure to be ready to go. So as I understand it, that's the principal issue. So it's not that we can prepare for this in advance, it's how we prepare if and when it occurs.
So will this vaccine research help put us in a place where we are ready if something like that happens? Would that be the infrastructure we would need?
Yes, we are. Yes, the kind of work that we are doing and that is being done in the state would prepare us to be part of a national/international response to a pandemic flu outbreak. But the DHR requirement, the public health requirement, then includes a lot of other things other than the specific scientific response to to a flu outbreak.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
talked about these centers of excellence that
Yes,
we
sir.
compete for.
And I was late. I apologize. I was a little late getting here.
The Medical College of Georgia, Emory University, and the University of Georgia are now on a short list for a National Center of Excellence in Influenza. It'd be a $20 million grant that would come to those institutions.
The three working together?
Mhm.
Okay.
So again, we have a lot of skills in place now that we're able to compete for these large opportunities, but I think Dr. Ron is right with everything he said, that there is a public health imperative right now that we're prepared, but we are involved in some of the leading edge research across our institutions.
And we are, our institutions, it seems, are all working together, collaborating on where our expertise is to try to make sure we are, I guess in a case like this, we can pull down these federal grants.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that point that you make it's impossible to overstate its importance. The science is so big, and the expertise that's required so diverse that the premium on partnership is much greater than it's ever been before. We would not be competitive to recruit, retain, support, and do the work of our top investigators if we did not have an infrastructure in place to facilitate partnership.
So what we need to do is where the expertise is, make sure we are helping those schools to continue to do their job in their expertise areas.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next question, Chairman Fleming.
Mr. President, I appreciate you coming today, and through some previous speakers that we've had for this subcommittee, I've tried to ask some questions to share some information that I understand about the dental school situation in Augusta, and I'm going to show everybody why, everybody's learned why I went to law school, not med school, because I'm not smart enough to understand it or explain it, but I think you can do a good job. And here's the situation as I understand it. We've got a building that's almost 40 years old where we house our dental school in Augusta. And there is only about 50 or so dentists they produce a year, where Georgia needs about 200. The only other dental school at Emory closed about 20 years ago. If we don't get a different building to house the dental school, two things are going to happen. Number one, we can't expand the current building because it's got asbestos in it. And also the equipment in the school right now where we're teaching these kids is outdated, and you can't even replace it anymore. You can't get spare parts. You can't put new equipment in the current building because of the fact the rooms aren't large enough physically to hold new dental equipment. Am I right on that? And what are we doing to try to straighten out that situation?
Yes, you are right. There are 56 dental schools in the United States. Georgia has one. It's an excellent school. 100% of the students last year passed their phase 2 of their boards on the first try. But we are limited in in the size of the class that we can accommodate by our facilities, by clinical operatories. We went from 56 to 62 several years ago, and that's the absolute max. We've done a facilities assessment. We have a building that is structurally sound, is 36 years old, but needs to be really updated substantially for dental education. Dental education, unlike medical education, all occurs within 4 years. You know, in medical school, we've got 4 years of medical school and then 3 years of residency. For dental school, it all happens in 4 years, after which we release somebody as being ready to practice independently. And what they do is irreversible. So we need them to be acquiring their skills on what they're going to be using when they're out there in practice. We have about $10 million of clinical equipment that is at its end of life. In order to replace that equipment, it needs to be replaced with current generation equipment. And if you think about dental chairs of 30 years ago and what they are today, they're different. With computer screens and fiber optics and high-speed drills, we need more electrical capacity and we need more space. per operatory. Plus, we have privacy and confidentiality issues that have emerged since 30 years ago. So to upgrade the building, we have to go through and do some structural things. The building is fine until we do anything. As soon as we do anything, then we have to abate asbestos. And the best asbestos is in the floor and the walls and the pipe fittings and everywhere. And we've been told it would take 4 to 5 years to go through the building, and it would cost about $78 million to do that. The recommendation from 2 separate analyses was, in order for us to upgrade it, it's better to retain that and reuse that building because it has residual value to us for many purposes, and build a new building for the dental school. And the proposal approved by the Board of Regents last spring was to put on the project list $78 million in public funding for the dental school, and MCG would be responsible for the balance. What's in the budget this year is planning and design money. And we need to get on with that because we're concerned about this equipment that's in a run-to-fail mode. So we feel urgency about that.
So the bottom line is if we don't go ahead and start the process with $5 million of design, we'll have a dental school that can't teach students in a matter of maybe months or years because of equipment failures.
We could. That's the risk that we're facing.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman Lewis.
Thank you, Doctor. Inasmuch as y'all do research at your institution, can you explain how much, if any at all, collaboration there might be between your institution and the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta?
Actually, there's not nearly as much as we would like. That's the short answer. We have done, traditionally medical education has focused on the specific patient practitioner interaction, whether it's nursing, dentistry, allied health, or medicine, with less focus on population health as a whole, community health, more focus on health care, less focused on health. We need to promote more of that. Actually, I've got a meeting set up to meet with Director Gerberding. We've had several conversations about how we might facilitate that. That's important.
In addition to that, is there any similar conversations that might be going on with other federal organizations, such as maybe Army Medical Research or anything like that?
Well, we have a VA on our campus, and we do our faculty staff the VA. Our students go there. They're active participants in what happens with the VA. We also collaborate with this region with military medicine. And so we do things jointly with them, and we have grant funding through Department of Defense, a whole variety of different organizations and agencies.
Thank you.
We're going to move on, but I want to ask one quick question about goals, and I hope that you'll participate in 2 or 3 weeks when we do have you 4 research presidents in the appropriations room. I think it'd be an incredible experience. We'll try to bring the press in to cover it and let you share your wonderful stories that you have and have question and answer time, which is the most important thing. One thing that I want to ask you about goals. I hear all these wonderful things that you're doing. Are there any goals coming down from the governor's office or you personally to cure XYZ cancers within 5 years, 10 years, or next year? Or the like, or do you have some major goal that you'd personally like to see accomplished very, very short time? Where we as
I've never had an exit strategy, so I've never said once this is accomplished, I'm ready to go. Our goal is to continuously improve our ability to be an asset for the state in improving the health of the population, and we do that through all kinds of different things. Certainly, the dental school, getting the dental school on a footing to move forward is critical. Addressing the workforce needs, developing a strategy statewide for meeting our health professional workforce needs is critical. And the cancer center, getting our cancer center firmly established so that it really is competitive for NCI Cancer Center designation is a very, very important strategy as well.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Thank you for your patience, and we're going to try to move as quickly as we can to the next one.
Well, thank you.
The next one is Traditional Industries Program. I guess that's Dr. Charles Estes. If you could try to hold your comments 3 or 4 minutes and let us have some questions, sir, so we can catch up on time. Thank you for being with us. And we got another 2 or 3 members in. Appreciate you coming, members.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Charles Estes with Georgia Tech, and I oversee the Traditional Industries Program on behalf of the University System of Georgia. it's a little bit humbling to follow the last two gentlemen with Georgia Research Alliance and the medical college, but we think we do have an important program that works with the textile, carpet, forestry, pulp, paper, and food processing industries. These industries still employ about 35% of the manufacturing jobs that are in the state. We get about $3 million in general funds, and then we hope to receive about $900,000 in bond funds for equipment. It's my understanding that I was to focus on the bond fund request. It's important to understand that our cycle is to receive proposals from our researchers in February. We have industry committees that evaluate those proposals in about the April time period. So it's really in May when we understand exactly the equipment that's being requested to support the research projects. But as been inferred in these last couple of presentations, we have high-quality researchers, and they need the right kind of tools and equipment to be able to conduct the kind of quality research that's going to make a difference. So these bond funds are what provides us with the research infrastructure that they need to work on projects that are appropriate to the industry. The types of equipment that we end up purchasing for this range in terms of small pieces. It may be $1,000 or $2 each, all the way up to equipment that may cost $75,000 to $100,000 each. So it's a wide range of new equipment. A lot of the requests for equipment may be to modify existing equipment, bring it up to speed, add certain kind of analysis capability or so forth. And then finally, an extremely important part of this, in many cases there's not that right type of research equipment that exists off the shelf. So they have to fabricate their own research equipment from various components. And in many cases, it's equipment that is taken out to the field, set up in trials in plants to use to transfer the research in those areas. And this is where particularly private companies take a strong interest in seeing that those prototypes function so that they can hopefully at some point in time commercialize that particular equipment. Without this research equipment, a couple of things, without the equipment and the funds to support that, we obviously would not be able to do as many projects per year. We currently conduct about 35 or 40 research projects a year. Sometimes they last for 2 years or 3 years. It would certainly change the type of research that we do if we did not have money to buy the equipment to support the research. And it would eliminate this opportunity to take these prototypes out in the field to really maximize the commercialization potential on that. I do have a report I want to leave with you. I don't have enough copies, I don't think, for everybody, but it presents a list of the equipment that was asked for in our proposals from this prior year, and so you can be able to see exactly the kinds of things, but it does vary from year to year. But the main thing to remember is that, again, without the equipment, the researchers would not be nearly as effective from that perspective.
Thank you, sir. One reason we brought him in today is because some of the new members aren't familiar with this particular program. So any other questions for the members? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to leave some information here with you.
Thank you for being with us. Dr. Carl Patton, you sitting there with another guy in a blue tie. Is this the blue tie, white shirt gang today? And thank you for being here, Dr. Patton. Dr. Patton with Georgia State University.
Thank you, Chairman Smith and committee members. It's always great to be with you and to talk about Georgia State University. You know, we're only 2 blocks away, but one of the things I need to always remind people is we serve all of Georgia. Just because we're down the street, and I know you come to our rec center, some of you do, we do serve all of Georgia. Our students come from every county in Georgia. And the other thing I'd like to make sure you remember is that we send those students back to where they come from. Our graduates work in every single county in this state, so we often like to talk about serving all of Georgia. So teaching is important for us, and I think many of you know what we do in terms of teaching, but service is also important, and it's another way we serve the taxpayers. And I wanted to say a little bit about this. Chairman Smith knows about our bio bus. We've taken the bio bus around the state to help elementary and secondary students learn science, and I know the chairman is well aware of that. Another area I want to talk about is grandchildren. I want to focus on that for a few minutes. Over 4 million children in the United States live in grandparent-headed households. And I could ask you a carpool quiz question. How many children in Georgia, do you think, live with their grandparents instead of their own parents? Well, the answer to that is 92,000. There are 92,000 grandchildren in Georgia being raised by their grandparents. Well, through a program at Georgia State, we've saved the taxpayers of Georgia millions of dollars by keeping these grandchildren out of the foster care system. Since its founding 11 years ago, Project Healthy Grandparents has served 560 families and 1,300 children here in Georgia. What this program does is helps grandparents raise their grandchildren when the parents cannot raise those children. And so it keeps the children out of the foster care system. What this does, it saves the state of Georgia $13.50 a day per child by keeping these children out of the foster care system. So in just 1 year of that program, that's $6.5 million saved the state of Georgia and the taxpayers. If you take a look at that program over its 11 years, it saved the state $35 million for all those children kept out of the foster care system. So you know about our BioBus. I thought maybe I'd tell you about our Healthy Grandparents program, because that is having a tremendous impact across the state. And it's probably something you don't think that universities do. We do that as a service project, but we also do it because of the research component in there and the involvement of many of our colleges and our students in that program. I want to also then tell you about a student, a Georgia State student, who's been raised to a large degree by his grandparents, to continue with that theme of grandparents raising their grandchildren. But I need to ask you a question first. Anyone here who's ever been to Harold's restaurant? Now, come on, I know you've been to Harold's. Raise your hand, you've been to Harold's. Okay. Harold's Barbecue. You know where that is. I've seen many of you there. Okay. The reason I asked you that question is because Harold and his wife have helped raise their grandson, Jordan Cannon. Jordan is working at Georgia State University on his master's degree in criminal justice. And now this tells a good story about your investment in the university system. Jordan graduated with distinction from Eastside High School in Covington, Georgia. Then he went on to attend Georgia College and State University, and he graduated with a bachelor's degree in sociology and was the outstanding graduate in sociology. Now he's over at Georgia State pursuing his master's degree in criminal justice. He also works 32 hours a week. He holds two jobs. One is a research assistant in criminal justice, and another is a graduate assistant in our student center. So this is a student who's raised by his grandparents, went through the university system, got an undergraduate degree at one institution, getting his graduate degree yet at another institution. But his plans don't stop with simply his master's degree at Georgia State. He's already pursuing the possibility of a doctorate in either sociology or criminology, and he's applied to 4 universities where he hopes to go on to get that doctorate. But he's also applied for teaching positions in Japan and England. So no matter what path Jordan takes, he's going to be successful. And I think he is an example of the great ambassadors for higher education that we have here in the university system of Georgia. Certainly we're proud of the impact that we've had on this young man at Georgia State University. And I hope you also are proud of the impact that you have had by investing in the university system, not only on Jordan, but thousands of other students like him who indeed make it through the system. Maybe they have a rough time with their home life and their family. They get on with it, they get into the university system, and they can transfer among institutions. And we're proud now that he's ready to graduate from Georgia State. I give you this story because I wanted to give you an example of how your university system does work. Now, Chairman Smith, I asked that question about Harold's, but I had some evidence that I think maybe you and some other folks ate there yesterday. So what I want you to do the next time you go to Harold's is to tell Harold that you heard the story about his grandson and tell him what a great grandson he does have. Your investment in the university system of Georgia makes these stories possible, so I want to thank you for your support and what you do for us every day. I also want to thank you for funding our science teaching laboratory building. You may recall I was here last year speaking about that building. You did indeed fund it. You provided a total of $40 million towards one of the 2 buildings that we're going to be building in our $142 million science complex. The other $102 million came from 9 other sources, from private funding, from philanthropy. But it also came from the faculty who are going to be working in those two buildings. We raised a substantial amount of money from the faculty who will teach in those two buildings. I think this leverage, $40 million with 102 raised to match that $40 million, is a great example of the leverage and the value of the investment you're making in the university system. But it doesn't just stop there with that dollar investment. That science teaching lab, which is under construction now, will serve 5,000 majors each day, 5,000 science majors, the people who are helping us with the drugs, with the biology, with the chemistry, with the things that we so desperately need in our lives, in the lives of Georgians. That project, though, is also going to help us make room for more high-tech startup companies, and it's also going to help us keep in Georgia the startup companies that we now have on our campus. You know, many of the companies that start up leave the state, but our science park is going to allow us to keep those startup companies in Georgia. So let me just sum up that little investment you made last year. Your $40 million investment leveraged $102 million to help us bring that project to fruition. But that lab will have an $800 million economic impact over the first 5 years of its existence when you look at the new research projects that we will be bringing in. The value added from your investment, I think, turns out to be pretty tremendous. So I want to stand up here today and thank you for that. I also want to thank you for the formula funding, which continues to be important. We don't take that formula funding lightly, so thank you for continuing that. MRR, also in your budget, of course, is important to our campuses. At Georgia State alone, we have over $100 million in deferred maintenance. And now this is a hard area for us to raise private dollars. There are few private donors who want to cut a ribbon over a roof repair or a life safety improvement. I mentioned the great investments we got on the science teaching lab. That's building new buildings. But I don't have many donors out there who are ready to cut a ribbon over a pothole, and I think you know what I mean. So MRR is important. And you know this year there's $60 million in MRR in the governor's proposed budget, so which we desperately hope you will continue to support that. You heard about the GRA earlier today, I believe. I hope that, of course, you'll support the GRA's request. The GRA has helped Georgia State immensely. It's helped us increase the research in the sciences over the past decade. We are now at $60 million a year in external research funding. And, you know, when I say external research funding, I'm talking about other people's money from outside the state that comes to Georgia because of the investment that you've made in the GRA. So I want to thank you for that and encourage you to continue to fund the GRA. The funding for the GRA has also allowed us to recruit great eminent scholars to Georgia and, of course, to Georgia State. So there's $30 million in the core budget, in the budget for the core activities of the GRA. I hope you'll continue to fund that. But there's also another $10 million that you've heard about for the GRA vaccine initiative. I hope you will continue to support that. The vaccine initiative is important for us. We will use our portion of those funds to develop a diagnostic focus for the vaccine manufacturing production facility. That's a mouthful to say. We're going to be building a vaccine manufacturing production facility in our new science park, and as part of that, there's going to be a diagnostics component, and the GR funding will support that. So the additional $10 million is important, and I hope, again, you will continue to look favorably at that. There's one final thing I'd like to ask before I know you're going to be asking a question, and that involves the minors projects that the Regents proposed. The Regents proposed a minors list which had, for us on it, $4.8 million to replace the roof and ventilation exhaust stacks on our existing Natural Science Center. So if you add minor projects, I hope you'll keep that minor project in mind. If that were to come to fruition, we got a new roof and new exhaust stacks, I'd invite you down to cut a ribbon over that roof replacement. I want to thank you for all the support, the friendship you've given us. You've been great friends to the system and to Georgia State, and I appreciate you letting me come again today and tell you a little bit about what's happening at Georgia State. And don't forget, next time you're at Harold's, tell Harold he's done a great job with his grandson.
Thank you, Dr. Patton. Any questions from the members? Got the Chairman Harbin. What number are you? Number 6. Chairman Harbin.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. Dr. Patton, just a quick question, a clarification, I guess. The Natural Science Center exhaust stack replacement. There's a roof, you said, involved in that also?
You have to replace the roof along with the stacks. The stacks go through the roof, and so it's a combination. The roof has reached its lifetime expectancy as well. And because of changes in life safety requirements, we have to now raise the stacks to a higher level. So it's a combination of both the stacks and the roof.
Why would that not fall under major repairs, rehabilitation?
I think it's because of the size of the project. It's a huge project.
But technically it is a rehabilitation.
Well, I think it's also an upgrade, a changing of the life safety requirements. It's not simply just fixing something that's broken, but changing it to a new level, a new standard.
But
I think that's how we're, I guess I'm not ready to defend exactly why it's in that category. That's how we're told to categorize various things, and I'm a pretty good soldier. I follow the directions of the categories.
Plus, the code had changed, Mr. Chairman, where they had to extend the stacks a little higher, so that factored into it. When they did the roof, they couldn't go back to those stacks.
Yeah.
The code, health state code changed, so they had to replace all those.
But technically it's a repair and rehabilitation.
It's a repair.
And we're just having, because of its size, that's why you're telling me it's under the minors program. What's the size limit under MR&R?
Well, it's 5 million less than the minor.
Under the
No,
minors?
MR&R projects, we have some of those that are much smaller than that. It might be repairing an elevator. It might be replacing lighting systems. So those projects on our campus are much less than that. Our share of MR&R is only $1 million or $2 a year. So they're small projects. Our share of the state MRR, of the Board of Regents MRR, our share is very, very small. Okay. So it would take 4 or 5 years of MRR to do a project like this.
Thank you. That's just need a clarification on that. Thank you.
Dr. Patton, as I said earlier, you might have not been here. We're trying to put together a meeting where you and the 3 other research presidents go before the legislators and the public in the appropriations room sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks, when we can schedule all 4 of you plus Mike Cassidy with the Georgia Research Alliance, and Representative Bill Hembry, who's also higher ed chairman, has agreed to moderate this. And we've got to give you 10 minutes apiece then, and then have an hour's questioning so that we can get the word out what wonderful things you and the other campuses do in the state of Georgia, and for Georgia, and for the world for that matter. So
I look forward to doing that.
Thank you very much. Okay. Any other questions? We don't have any.
Okay, thank you, sir. It's always good to be with you.
Gwinnett, let me see, Georgia, Gwinnett State College. Did I say it right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you talking about Georgia Gwinnett College. I'm pleased to say Georgia Gwinnett College has no roofs that need repair. Of course, we have no roofs at Georgia Gwinnett College. According to my records, I had the privilege of appearing before this subcommittee exactly 1 year ago today, and I'm delighted to be able to meet with you again this year to discuss the programs at GGC. It's been an eventful year for us since I've stood before you last. The good news is, thanks to the support that you gave us last year, we're off and running. In the years since I met with you, we've hired a sensational team of senior administrators, faculty, and staff, and opened our doors to our first students this past August. As you know, GGC was created in 2005 by a resolution passed by the Board of Regents and by the Georgia Legislature. We are the first new 4-year public college in the state of Georgia in over 100 years. And according to the American Council on Education, we are the first new public 4-year institution to be chartered in the United States in the 21st century. Accordingly, the mission of GGC is decidedly 21st century. The Regent's intention is for us to be a model of innovative instructional methodology for all the other colleges and universities in the system. For all that we have accomplished, the magnitude of our tasks will increase many-fold in the coming months. Our timetable is ambitious. In just a few months, we will begin to enroll upwards of 2,000 to 3,000 freshmen who will show up at our doors and expect a full 4-year college environment. By the time they arrive in August, we will have to hire the entire general education faculty and put into place all the coursework to support our programs in math and science, history, English, information technology, and humanities and social sciences. Ladies and gentlemen, I've faced many challenges during the course of my military, educational, and administrative careers in the course of the last 38 years, but preparing for the onslaught we get in August at Georgia Gwinnett College with our first freshman class may be the most demanding of all. Obviously, we have many needs for this fledgling college to be successful. Let me say that the Board of Regents has been exemplary in its support for our college thus far. In addition to shifting considerable internal funds for our use, the Chancellor and his senior staff have devoted countless hours to assisting us in various organizational and academic issues. The Governor and the Legislature have also been absolute stalwarts in understanding and supporting the needs of this new institution. And we very much appreciate all that you have done for us. That said, we do have a pressing need that we have to address now. Specifically, we have to build a library at GGC. Some ask, why are we still building libraries in the digital age? Good question. 10 years ago, the presumption was that everything, including books, would be digitized. Well, it hasn't happened. Books are still very much in use and will continue to be so for the foreseeable future. Digitizing books is, as it turns out, prohibitively expensive and not cost effective. So an entirely electronic library would be prohibitively expensive. Further, who would want to read an entire book online? This is a copy of the biology book that we use out at GGC. One, it would be expensive to digitize. Two, imagine reading this thing online. While some might want to conclude that there's less demand for printed material, in fact, the reverse is true. The information revolution has, in fact, increased demand for information in all formats, to include print. Whatever one's view on the issue, the simple fact is we have to have a library in order to be accredited by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. The requirement is clear and unambiguous. Let me quote directly from the Principles of Accreditation enforced by SACS. The institution provides and supports student and faculty access and user privileges to adequate library collections, as well as other learning information resources consistent with the degrees offered. These collections and resources are sufficient to support all its educational, research, and public service programs. Unquote. The simple fact is, we do not have those facilities at Georgia Gwinnett College to meet this standard. The Board of Regents and the Governor understand this need, so the Governor has requested $28.3 million in his FY08 budget request for a library learning center for GGC. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I cannot overemphasize how critically important this project is for the future of Georgia Gwinnett College. We will not be accredited without it. I will point out the need for a library extends well beyond the need to house the collections that are required for both the general education curriculum and for every majors program that a college offers. Libraries are not solely warehouses for books. They are learning centers. There's a need for a central facility, a learning center, where separate functions such as research instruction, student success programs, faculty development programs, and individual as well as group study facilities can come together in a synergistic fashion. Libraries are also the information commons on campus, a place where any student, regardless of economic circumstance, can have computer access to the educational technology systems and electronic data programs that are an inherent part of any curriculum. The legislature has much to be proud of in forming this new college and in meeting the rising needs of college students in the Northeast Georgia region, and in particular in Gwinnett County. I assure you I will do everything in my power to make GGC a success in every sense of the word. This will be a truly remarkable institution in just a few years, one of which all Georgians will be justifiably proud. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have at this time. Again, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and your committee, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
I noticed that Chairman Balfour is in the room. Is there a particular reason why you're here, sir?
I'm just a private following the general's orders.
General, you have a good supporter there.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
With,
Any
with,
questions?
With privates like that, I don't have any. I don't need any enemies.
What number? What number are you?
16.
16. Chairman Hurd. Chairman Hurd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Kaufman, I do have a couple of questions for you.
Yes, sir.
The population you anticipate this fall is?
Between 2,000 and 3,000 freshmen, in addition to the approximately 180 juniors we will have, a junior class and obviously a senior class. So we anticipate anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000 and beyond headcount at GGC this fall.
And the accreditation process, I understand that you have to be accredited within 3 years.
Well, we hope. A minimum of about 3 years. We will submit our request for accreditation in about a month. That will go to SACS. We hope get a candidacy visit in the summer of 2007, be given candidacy status in December 2007, and then be given full accreditation in December 2008. You cannot be accredited before your first students graduate. So by definition, the first graduates of any new college are graduating from an unaccredited college. And so we have reduced the timeline working with SACS to the greatest extent that we can. And we've told them that we have this proposal to build a library learning center, and they've indicated that an indication of support from the state would get us through candidacy this year, and then, of course, we hope to be turning dirt by the time they come for their accreditation visit.
And last question, the fact that this accreditation, the library is critical to the accreditation process by the fact that there's no design or anything done at this point. Being in the construction business, it's going to take probably a year or so to do the design work, minimum 2 years construction. So if we don't start and fund this right now, you're already behind the eight ball.
We will not proceed with accreditation. That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That sounds like a cross-examination, Mr. Hurd. Are you from Gwinnett County? We don't have any more questions, but thank you, General, for
Mr.
being
Chairman.
here, and best of luck to you.
Pleasure to see you again.
Appreciate all you do.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Adams with the University of Georgia. And by the way, we have a University of Georgia night at the depot, and I'm sure the president will invite you as well. Chairman Balfour, we look forward to seeing you once again soon, sir. Yes, sir. Yes. Dr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the commercial and would be happy to have, and I hope many of the members of the committee will join us at the depot tonight for our annual reception and get-together. UGA will be there, whether you want to see me or not, so I hope you do come. I want to thank the chairman and the committee for making the time available for each of us to come and to mention several needs that we have. I think, as most of you know, our mission statement and our charter is a statewide statement and a statewide responsibility, and I believe that one of the things that perhaps we're doing better than maybe has been done in a long time is we are keeping many of the best minds in Georgia. Many young people who used to trade off to Chapel Hill or Virginia or Duke or Ohio State or Michigan or somewhere are staying here, and I think that bodes very well for the future. And we take seriously our statewide mission, from the water projects in the North Georgia mountains to our expanding projects in Griffin, to our agricultural work in Tifton, to the main campus in Athens, to the research we do on animals of the sea and Skidaway. So we're grateful for this opportunity. I really have 3 items on my agenda today. I will say a word about facilities very quickly, a word about operations, and a word about some recent opportunities that have come to us. I'll do that very quickly and leave you room to make comments or questions as you wish. I want to thank the governor for including $37 million and change in his budget proposal for a new pharmacy building. We are the only public institution in the state providing pharmacists. You probably know that we're still importing far too many pharmacists, in excess of 2/3 of our pharmacists, from out of state. If you've stood in line at Revco or Eckerd or Publix or somewhere recently, you know how deficient we are in this region. The current facility allows for 125 students each fall. This will allow us to move, once it's built, toward a class of 200, and will go far toward alleviating the shortage of pharmacists in the state. Can also tell you that in this regard, our research shows that for every dollar the state spends in this area, we get an additional 52 cents back. So we think this is a very good investment for the state, and we're grateful that the governor has included it in his budget. You've worked with us recently on some very important projects. The Lamar Dodge School of Art is coming out of the ground on East Campus. The deal that we struck with you, if you'll remember, was that we then self-fund the expansion of the museum. That's a $20 million project. And I could stand before you today and tell you that we have 19 of that $20 million raised, and we'll have that obviously finished by the time the art school is finished and be ready to go on the museum project, which was our part of that deal. We raised $108 million on the outside last year, an all-time record, and had over 55,000 Georgians who wrote checks to the university. We also have on the program a few minutes for discussion of Rock Eagle, which is a very important project to us, and Mr. Tim Burgess, the Senior Vice President for Finance, is here to discuss that further, but that pretty much hits the facilities. Secondly, we have some operational challenges, and our greatest operational challenge right now is faculty salaries. We lost ground in 03 and 04 during the recession that we've not made up. A couple numbers I want to share with you. We've lost 6%, 6 percentage points relative to our peer group established by the Regents the last 4 years. We've fallen to 6. Originally, we were 6th in 2000 among the Regent-identified peer groups. We're now 12th of 16 in salaries. We've even dropped below Florida, not just in football and basketball, but in salaries as well. And we think we all want to at least be comparable in those areas. We really do need as much help as you can give us this year in the salary area. We are losing faculty we don't want to lose, and we think that's very important. I can also say to you that we think in some other areas we've done our part. We've had to absorb an additional $11 million for the employer side of health insurance. We've had a $7 million increase in our utility bills, and the operational pressures are as great as they've been in the 10 years that I've been here. Third and finally, I think the decision, though I disagreed with the decision by the Defense Department to close the Navy School in Athens and move it to Rhode Island, I think gives us an unprecedented opportunity. We were already, before that decision was made public, working with the Medical College of Georgia in Augusta for a collaborative effort to add physicians in this state. Our current collaborative plan would call for that site to host additionally 40 medical students in 09. We know from statistics that most states have 30 physicians per 100,000 of population. Georgia has 18. We're 45th in the nation in that category, and score very high in this state in obesity and diabetes and Parkinson's and other needs. Plus, we have an aging population, as my white hair indicates, and we believe that is part of our statewide function and statewide mission. I also want to close by echoing my own support for the $10 million vaccine initiative that Mike Cassidy has spoken to you about from a GRA perspective. I've spent a great deal of my own time personally in the recruitment of two, not yet successful, but two important vaccine plants to the state. We think the University of Georgia is one of the largest economic engines in the state. As most of you know, there are few companies that look at relocating here that we don't see at some point in the process, and we continue to think economic development is an important part of our mission as well. So I'll mention those three broad areas, Mr. Chairman, and pause for any questions or comments that anyone might wish to raise.
Thank you, President Adams. I had mentioned to the other research presidents, and they all said yes, so I hope you'll say yes to having a forum in the next 2 or 3 weeks, or certainly before a month from now, where the four of you and Mike Cassidy with the Research Alliance are focused upon in the appropriations room for a 10-minute segment from each of you, and then, or maybe 5 or 10 minutes at the most, and then leave it open for questioning, because we really hear some exciting things that are going on, and it's just us that are hearing it, it seems like, we'd like to broadcast the great work that's going on and let the people of Georgia know what's going on. And this is a good place to really put you on a pedestal.
Well,
not a pedestal, but
yeah, I rarely do I get on a pedestal unless someone's throwing something. So I'd be grateful for that opportunity, Mr. Chairman, and we'll certainly do it. I do want to say to you, I'm going to be out of the country for about 12 days from the 17th of February through the end of the month, and I'll send Burgess if I'm not here. But I've committed to look at the Indian Institutes of Technology that Senator Isaacson has asked us to go do during that. The provost and I will both be doing that, but I would love to be here for that, and I hope we can do that in a time period that meets your schedule, but I hope it meets mine as well. I'd like to personally do that.
Is Tom Daniel here still? Tom's going to have to Tom's going to have to herd these cats together, it looks like. So, anyways, he's agreed to do that.
Sure, love to do it. Thank you.
Representative Henry is going to moderate this, and we'll try our best to get the news media in.
Good.
Our first question is Representative Sims.
Actually, I have two questions. I hope they're very quick. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Based on salaries, why is there such a discrepancy at the 4-year versus the 2-year institutions? And can you explain that? And we also were told earlier, I was in a meeting, probably weren't there at the meeting, but there are people that are teaching in the adult literacy program that are making more than some of the professors that say at 2-year, 4-year institutions that don't even have PhDs. Can you describe that and why?
Well, that may also be a question for the Chancellor, with all due respect. I must say that the training that's required, the preparation, the research output at a research university is significantly different from that at a 2-year college. I think what you described you would find to be true nationwide. There is somewhat of a salary pecking order, for lack of a better term, and the 4-year and the research universities historically have had to pay better to get more highly trained people than the 2-year institutions. I am seeing more and more places, though, where there are high school faculty in this state who are paid better than college faculty, and that is a further indication of the ground I think we've lost the last 3 or 4 years.
And this is the other thing, maybe I need to address this for Regents, as to why that there's not a recognition of doctors, actual doctors and juris doctors as professors versus the fact that you have to have a PhD or a master's in order to be a professor. Do you see that? I mean, an actual doctor or dentist is teaching at some institutions now, and or a lawyer, and they're not recognized. They're usually just instructors, and they're not even recognized as professors, which kind of bothers me that they've actually gone out and practiced and done this, and now come back to teach.
Yeah. Well, I hate to be in the position of defending the lawyers, but I'm going to. I happen to agree with you, and we practice that way at the University of Georgia. For instance, the vice president for instruction at UGA is a lawyer. The person running the executive MBA program is a business lawyer. We do recognize fully in certain fields the capacity of lawyers and doctors and others to teach. The traditional education at a research university is a PhD, and about 96 or 7% of our faculty have terminal degrees in the field in which they're teaching. We think that's a strong qualitative statement, but I don't believe you would find at this institution, I don't know about others, any prohibition against hiring lawyers or dentists or doctors as you described.
Representative Royal.
Dr. Adams, I think you'll agree for many years I've probably been your most loyal Georgia Tech supporter.
You're one of my 2 or 3 most famous techies. You are. I appreciate it, Mr. Royal.
I also have a constituent who is very interested in the pharmacy school.
Right.
How many students do you have in the pharmacy school at this time?
In round numbers, about between 375 and 400.
With this new facility, new building, how many will you be able to?
It will grow to 550 to 600 in that range. So we'll be adding an additional roughly 75 students per class.
Okay. Out of the appropriation, how much in the private sector has been raised to assist you in this building?
This one has not been one that we were asked because of the instructional need to raise money for. Roughly $6 million, but most of that, frankly, is for the equipment. Mm-hmm. The building itself is one that has been on the list so long that the state, back in a time before life was like it is today, the state agreed to fund that as a state need. So the $37.2 million that is in the governor's budget is the brick and mortar portion. We have done some infrastructure work of a few $1 million at our expense, and we will be required to provide substantial amounts of research equipment, but that's been the current arrangement with the regents.
If the governor's recommendation is approved by the legislature, give me a time frame on when you think you'll be up and running in the new building.
Well, we think we could start this one within 6 months of the time that it was approved. Now, that, of course, would depend on when the bonds were sold, but if you said to me we're done in April, I think by the end of this year we'd be turning dirt because we've already had some planning money to get ready for it.
Good luck.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your help.
Representative Lewis.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. Dr. Adams, thank you for being here. I've just got 2 or 3 questions centered around one issue that you mentioned. I think you mentioned that there was a $7 million increase in your utility bills there at your campus over, I guess, last year?
Yes, sir. That's a 24-month comparison.
24-month. Could you elaborate real quickly what is that increase?
Yeah. The biggest factor is fuel for the steam plant. The second biggest factor has been the rise in electricity costs, and then thirdly, we run the second largest bus system in the state. We had 9 million boardings last year alone in our bus system. So those 3 areas combined cost us. When we pull up to the pump, so to speak, we had a $7 million hit in the rise in energy cost.
Okay. Well, I heard you say utility, so that's really your energy cost then.
That's correct.
Well, my final question is, that being your utility or energy bill, do you know if the university pays a local state sales tax on your consumption of energy and utility?
I don't think we do. No, sir. I could check that to be certain, but okay. I'm 90% certain that we do not.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from the committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. I guess Dr. Leland with the Georgia College and State University. Are you up? Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Tim Burgess with the University of Georgia. I'm sorry. Chairman Roy. Dr. Leland, I failed to see that Mr. Burgess needed to speak. He's part of the university. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being here, Mr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you again today. Good to see all of you on the committee, old friends and new friends. Glad to be here today to talk to you about something about health care and Medicaid for a change. You had asked for us to come and give you an update on the Rock Eagle Dining Hall project that we've been in phases of completing, and I'm glad to report to you today that the project's finally up on its feet, and we're about to truly start in earnest. As you well know, about $6.5 million in construction funds were appropriated last fiscal year to go with some design funds that we'd gotten previously to start building in addition to the dining hall down there. The design is complete. The construction documents have been in the hands of the construction manager for a couple of months now, and tomorrow we expect to meet with them and get what we call a guaranteed maximum price from the construction company. we fully expect them to be able to tell us that they'll be able to build the building, the 800-seat expanded dining hall for the appropriation dollars that we've got. And if that GMP comes in tomorrow as we would expect, then it's our expectation that construction on that expansion would start March 1st. It's about a 15, 16-month construction timeline, so that if the GMP is where we expect it to be, construction starts March 1st, and the dining hall will be open and ready for occupancy at the end of July in 08. So by late July of 08, we'd be ready to begin to occupy the new dining hall. I brought I didn't know what level of detail that you had seen in the past, but I brought for the members of the committee to see the renderings of what conceptual the conceptual design was on the expanded. We think it's going to be a very nice facility. It's going to fit in very well with the decor and the concept of the 4-H facility, and will greatly enhance the ability of the 4-H to feed the thousands of campers that are there each year. But this is ready to go. In a couple of months, you'll see dirt and the project coming out of the ground and be ready at the end of in July of 08. Be glad to try to answer any additional questions you may have about that.
Representative Royal.
Tim.
Yes, sir.
Maybe you said it and I was distracted, but what is the capacity of this design?
This design is an 800-seat expansion, and it's 800 seats, as all of us know, because that's the size of the construction that we are able to accommodate with the dollars that have been appropriated so far. There's been obviously a lot of conversation over the last year or so about the desire for this to be a bigger facility, and we certainly support that and would like to be able to manage and accommodate that. In that end, and to allow for that possibility, this building has been designed so that it could easily be expanded to 1,200. So we would start construction at 800 seats, but the long-term planning was that there would be a need for 1,200 seats, and so the design has been done in that way. We will start construction in such a way that if the funding were actually made available, say over the next 2 or 3 months, to increase the budget for that project so that it would actually allow for the construction of a 1,200-seat facility. The contractor is managing the project, and the design is such that a change order could be given to the contractor in April. Additional design work would be completed at that point for construction documents, and literally it could open up as a 1,200-seat facility in July of 08, just like it will now open up as an 800-seat facility with the current funding. So we've tried to look ahead and anticipate the possibilities that this thing may need to be bigger sooner than the funding that's currently available. And if that funding is made available for that, we will be able to accommodate that and finish construction at the same time with a larger facility.
Is the consensus in your group that you need 1,200 or 800?
I think if you talk to any of the managers at 4-H, they will tell you that for logistical reasons and the speed with which they would like to be able to feed large numbers of campers at any one time, it would be a much better programmatic aspect for them if they had a 1,200-seat dining hall. Currently at 600 seats. So the whole concept was to double the capacity of the dining hall, which would allow them to move the campers through the dining hall at a much faster pace, complete the dining activities in a shorter period of time, and leave more opportunities and more time for the other programmatic activities that go on at the camp.
How many more dollars would be needed?
We've also asked the contractor, when they give us the guaranteed maximum price tomorrow, to also give us what they believe the cost would be for the additional 400 seats. our architect's office tells me as late as yesterday that they still feel fairly confident that the original $2.25 million figure that we've been talking about for over a year now would still be sufficient. I would probably be in a much better position to firmly answer that tomorrow, but we still believe that it could be quite possible that that $2.2 million figure would be enough to add the other 400 seats.
Should those additional dollars show up, then, as you said earlier, it would be no problem adding the expanded size in the construction process.
Yes, sir. We have approached this project both in design and construction with the anticipation, or wanting to be able to at least allow for the possibility that funding would be made available during the construction period. And it just so happens, because we're now just starting construction, if these dollars come along in the next 2 or 3 months, it'll be easy to change order the project and allow the construction of a 1,200-seat facility.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Next up is Dr. Leland with Dr. Leland with Georgia State College and University.
Or Georgia College and State University. We call it Georgia College for short. That's a lot sweeter. So Georgia College it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak for just a few moments, and also to the rest of the committee members who are here. I will try to be really brief. That's pretty hard for university presidents, but we'll try anyway. As many of you know, Georgia College is Georgia's designated public liberal arts university. Our primary emphasis is on undergraduate education, but we also offer graduate degrees that meet strategic priorities of our state, for example, in nursing education and information technology. We have our main campus is in Milledgeville, and we also offer mainly graduate programs off-site in Macon and also at Warner Robins Air Force Base. Our undergraduate enrollment is a little over 5,000 this fall. Our total enrollment is a little over 6,000. Our projected optimal enrollment in Milledgeville is about 6,000 students. We are a historic campus, started approximately the same time as Georgia Tech, as the female counterpart to Georgia Tech, and we are in a state and national historic district bounded by a historic downtown and residential area. So we have very little room to grow in Milledgeville. We are very proud of the record in the last few years of this university. We have really increased our national reputation, and the handout cites a few instances. But for example, we're one of 3 public universities in Georgia listed in Kiplinger's Top 100, and the other 2 are Georgia Tech and University of Georgia. We've made incredible increases in our retention rates. We also are the 3rd highest in the university system of Georgia, with a freshman to sophomore rate of 84% last year, 93% retained within the system. So just a little bit of background about who we are. Obviously, since we are a limited growth campus, our future capital needs focus on the renovation of historic buildings rather than new construction. And last year, you funded, and thank you, you funded the restoration of 2 historic buildings on our Milledgeville campus. One was Parks Nursing and Health Sciences, and the other one was the Health Sciences building. And these are the 2 buildings on our campus that house all of our health science programs, including our nursing program. The governor's FY08 budget recommendation asks for an additional $1 million in equipment funding for these 2 renovated buildings. These buildings, demolition phase has been completed in these buildings, and we're beginning the renovation as I speak. I actually went by with my hard hat today and took a look at what was happening. These buildings had no major renovations since 1929 for one of them and 1939 for another one. So as you can imagine, they were pretty out of date for today's educational needs, and particularly in the healthcare field, which has become more and more high-tech and more dependent on state-of-the-art teaching labs in areas such as nursing education. So the project outcomes, so we're looking for a support for that $1 million in equipment funding. The project outcomes include enhancing a very first-rate nursing program through updating the teaching facilities. And I say that because our pass rate, for example, on the licensure exam is 96%. 96%. The national average is 87%. So although we're not the highest volume producer of nurses in the state, when they come in our program, they're likely to come out with a license and be in our hospital and nursing care facilities. And also, it will allow us, because of the teaching labs that are included in this building, to better prepare our graduates to meet strategic needs around the state. For example, trauma care is a great example. And then finally, we will be able to increase our capacity in the nursing, undergraduate nursing program at Georgia College. So we would appreciate your support for this funding.
Any questions from the committee? Got a comment. Our able intern, Robert Buckley, also goes to your school, and he's in the appropriations
We know Robert
office.
very well. He's
a very, very talented young man, and we're glad to have him with us. And I, of course, have been to your campus, and the excitement is there. You can see it. You can feel it being around you and your assistant. But any questions from the committee? Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much.
See you later. Dr. Julia Scott with Savannah State University. Glad you're here with us.
Good afternoon, Chairman Smith and members of the committee. First, I'm going to tell you this is a sentence before what I was going to say next. I am Jane Gates, and Chief Academic Officer for Savannah State University, and I extend to you an apology for the absence of the interim president, Dr. Julius Scott, Jr., who was unable to make the hearing today. So I am here substituting for him. But thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you to speak to the new academic building project. From the modest beginnings, just to give you a little, most of you are very familiar, I'm sure, at Savannah State University, from the modest beginnings in about the 1890s to a comprehensive university, the university system of Georgia, Savannah State University has experienced tremendous growth, specifically from the time frame 1998 to 1999, where we saw recently, over the fall 2005, a 7.8% increase. So currently we have approximately 3,200 students enrolled in 22 undergraduate and 5 graduate degree programs in 3 colleges. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Governor Perdue for including the academic classroom building ranked #1 in the region's priority and majors construction fund to approximately $12.7 million in the budget recommendation. This building is ready for construction upon approval. The construction was selected as the general contractor for this project holder, and the schedule E50 has been developed. The conceptual design has been completed. The bonds are scheduled to be sold upon approval, of course, of this body, August and September 2007. So I brought a copy of this wonderful structure that we would add to the Savannah State University campus, and would like to just share a little about what we do and what we're doing in our academic endeavors at Savannah State University. So we can pass that around. So we're very excited. We're at that point. Savannah State University really strives to integrate world-class research exceptional teaching and outstanding service to Georgia and beyond. So this building will add to our capacity. The 53,000 square foot academic building will add to our capacity to provide an infrastructure that's necessary to handle changing technology, active teaching and learning, pedagogy, and growing residential academic programs. We've been approved within the last 2 years by the Board of Regents for 2 new academic programs, the Behavior Analysis Program and the Homeland Security and Emergency Management Program. Both the programs would be housed in this particular new building. Currently, what we have on campus, the programs, the degree programs, serving approximately 500 students with majors and minors in behavior analysis and criminal justice, history, sociology, has grown by enormous leaps. We are projecting an additional 46% growth in enrollment in these majors by 2012. So there are 5 classrooms now that we're in. We're in 5 classrooms with a maximum seating capacity of 35, 1 classroom with a seating capacity of 50 students, paint halls. So the bottom line here, quite simply, is that we have overcrowded classrooms, necessitates search for larger rooms and reassignments, and it's just inadequate space as we're growing. Additionally, added to what we're addressing in the social sciences, in those particular disciplines, we also have housed in this building 3 other departments. So in addition to behavioral and social sciences, the Department of Liberal Arts, Social Work, and Master of Public Administration. Savannah State University provides students an excellent education and fulfills the historically black college university mission and vision. And we are doing a very good job here in promoting cognitive growth and development through strong relationships with faculty, staff, and administrators. So construction of this modern general facility will assist us in meeting our institutional goals and objectives, and will provide access and quality for every student in the foundational courses, because we offer the core curriculum courses in this building as well, in the academic building. So I really urge you for your support of this request to fund this new academic building. And today what we've seen, more than ever, we've seen many young men and women, black men and women, who choose to attend historically black colleges and universities. And HBCUs continue to provide a door to the future, to a better life, to a better people, and to a more educated Georgia. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today on our enrollment successes and academic building challenges. I appreciate your continued support for higher education and Savannah State University. I am now open to questions, sir, or anyone on the committee.
I apologize for calling you somebody else. That's who was on the list, Dr. Gibbs.
Gates. That's correct. That's correct. That was
Dr. Jane Gates.
Dr. Scott was on the list. That is correct.
So, any questions from the members?
Thank you.
We'd like to visit your campus at the earliest
Please.
convenience after the sessions is over.
I extend an invitation and will be very happy to speak with whomever in the group facilitates that visit.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, ma'am.
Certainly.
I assume I have this name right, Dr. Kathy Love, Central Georgia Tech. I did get it right. Glad you're here.
Thank you. I want to start by saying I just am thrilled by the opportunity to follow the University of Georgia, Medical College of Georgia, and some of the great speakers you've had thus far. But I think we have just as great a tale to tell. As you said, I'm Kathy Love. I'm serving as interim president of Central Georgia Technical College, and I've been doing that for about the past 6 months. Our 7-county service area includes Bibb, Baldwin, Crawford, Jones, Monroe, Putnam, and Twiggs counties. The expansion of our Milledgeville campus in Baldwin County has been the highest priority capital outlay request for Central Georgia Tech since 2001. And I think when we finish this briefing that you'll understand why it was number 2 on our department's major capital outlay request. We are so committed to seeing this project come to fruition that we have allocated over $560,000 of FY 2006 local funds for the design phase of this facility. Currently in Milledgeville, we have one building that's about 59,000 square feet. The proposed expansion would give us a 3-story building that would add a little over 72,000 square feet. This original campus, as it stands today, was built to accommodate 450 students, and we have long exceeded this capacity. The primary purpose of this proposed facility is so that we can expand our allied health and elder care programs, and so that we can add hospitality programs to our program offering, and then relocate the library and the bookstore into a permanent facility. In the handout that I've given you, you've got a 1-page fact sheet on the building, but you also have a couple of pictures that show the modular buildings that the bookstore and the library are in, and then some interior pictures of the crowded conditions when the students are in those modular facilities. You've already heard today about accreditation and how important a library is. Well, it's just as important to Central Georgia Technical College. We also are accredited by SAC's Commission on Colleges. As I've said, the major purpose of this facility is so that we can expand our allied health care programs. Baldwin County is not unlike the rest of the state in that it has a major need for trained health care professionals. In Baldwin County alone, there are 196 health care and social service agencies which currently employ over 3,600 employees. Among these facilities are Oconee Regional Medical Center, which is planning an expansion in the near future, Central State Psychiatric Hospital. We have 6 state prisons, all of which have infirmaries, and numerous ambulatory health care providers in the Baldwin County area. The projected employment growth in the healthcare field between 2005 and 2010, according to the Department of Labor, is 12.8% in hospitals in the Baldwin County area and 55.8% in ambulatory health care. So we've got a great need to provide some more workers for the healthcare industry in that area. And I know several of you have heard our Interim Commissioner Jackson talk about the shift in enrollment that we've experienced. Well, Central Georgia Tech has had that same shift. We've noticed a dramatic decline in IT enrollment, particularly at our Milledgeville campus as well as our main campus, and a strong demand for health care. And just as we mentioned that it's more expensive to offer health care programs than it is IT programs in many cases, they're also very space intensive. And we simply have no space in order to expand the programs as we need to. We also plan to begin offering various hospitality industry programs at our Milledgeville campus. The Baldwin County area experienced a 165% increase in tourism from the year 2001 to 2004. This is partially due to the historical nature that you heard discussed earlier, the antebellum capital, Lake Sinclair, the Highway 441 corridor development, and the Oconee River Greenway project, which is just about to enter Phase 1. This project alone is expected to generate a minimum of 86 new hospitality jobs and $2.6 million tourism dollars for the area. These programs also have been requested by area high schools for dual enrollment opportunities for their students. With these increased programs, we think that we can add an immediate increase of 300 students to the student population by adding these programs with the potential for much greater growth. The anticipated cost, as you can see from your handout, is a little over $15.8 million. This project was number 2 on the Department of Technical and Adult Education's capital outlay request. I want to stress that fact. Last year we were number 8, and since all but 1 through 7 were funded, we have moved up to number 2. The process of prioritizing this list by our state board and sticking to those priorities is working, and I would encourage you to consider our state board's ranking in funding this facility. And I'll entertain any questions.
What question does the honorable dear friend from Milledgeville, Representative Parham, have relating to this project?
That's a great question. Yes, we do.
What number are you? Do you have any leading questions to the lady, Representative Parham?
They've done a fantastic job with what they had. If we add this, they'll be able to do a lot more fantastic, better job.
Or more of the same fantastic, better job? Okay, great.
That sounds like old English.
Thank you.
Any questions to the members? What number? The light didn't come on. 16.
Just for to reinforce your argument, could you please remind the committee of y'all's history of placement of students that graduate from the technical colleges?
Oh, I would love to remind you of that. We have historically a 98% placement rate of our students who go on to work in field or related field or continue their education. And I believe when we look at how many actually go to work, not even considering those that continue their education, we're looking at about an 84% the last time we ran numbers on that of people who leave our campus and go to work. That's what we're about. We're here for workforce development. We're here to put folks to work and no other reason. But we need facilities to do that.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Is anybody here from Fort Valley State? Could you, I'm going to work you in. We apologize for yesterday or the day before or whatever. We thought you were there, but we'll work you in, sir, if you'll give us another 10 minutes or so. Absolutely. We'll stay here and wait on your comments. But Dr. Glenn Divert, I did a good job on that one, finally. Southwest Georgia Tech, glad you're here with us.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity this afternoon to share with you our capital outlay request. Our original request, I'm going to back up and give you a little history. Our original request was for this classroom building, and that originated approximately 10 years ago. That request was for a $19 million facility, which would be a 106,000 square foot building. In March 2002, we received partial funding for this project. However, the dollar amount was much less than the original request. We actually received $11 million, and $4 million of that request was for the renovation of an existing building on our campus. Therefore, we only received $7 million for the new construction that we needed. Therefore, as a result, I think that's how we come up with the name of this particular project, Classroom Building Phase 2. When in actuality, what we're requesting is space for additional allied health classrooms and space. If I can direct your attention to the one-page handout that I just distributed, it'll probably give you all the information I think that you'll need on this project. The request is for $11,760,000. The square footage of the building is 52,585. And if you drop down to the chart area, we've listed all the programs that will either be new in the building, that will be existing programs that we would move to this building, programs that would be expanding, and of course programs that will just actually relocate and try to expand upon those programs. Let's start at the very top with the associate degree nursing program, which is probably our most pressing need. We started the associate degree nursing program back in 2002. Currently, we're serving 50 students in the generic track of that program, and we also have an ADN practical nursing bridge where we're serving 15 additional students. We have the capacity and the approval to serve 100 students with the faculty on staff, but with our current facilities, the classroom and lab space, we can only serve 65 at this time. So this building would mean an immediate increase of 35 ADN students or RN students. In addition to that, we'd be moving the practical nursing program over there since those classrooms and labs go hand in hand and could be jointly used. Other programs that we would be adding on or adding to are our gerontology associate degree program and associated technical certificates. Would be adding, and probably our second most pressing need is for natural science classrooms. Currently we have one biology lab and one chemistry lab. But if you look down the list here, we have a great need for anatomy and physiology AHS 101 classrooms, for biology 193, biology 194, microbiology, 2 chemistry classes, and physics as well. So we have 2 classrooms that actually house all of these particular programs and courses. In addition, we actually need more room for human growth and development or psychology classes, introduction to microcomputers, and all the supporting general education classes. I guess the bottom line is we're doing a fairly adequate job supporting the programs that we have, but we have absolutely no classroom or lab space to either expand these programs or to add new programs and the programs that are most needed within our community there in Thomasville. So, again, the bottom line is we just need more classroom space.
Thank you, sir. I have one question before I go to Representative Royal. Could you go down one more time the funding that you've already received and give me the timelines and so forth?
The original request came about 10 years ago, and it was for $19 million.
How many?
$19 million.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2002, we received $11 million. And $4 million of that was designated for the renovation of our Sewell building. So we had just over $7 million of the original 19 for new classroom construction. So we're
what
about
are we
12
talking,
million.
19 or
So our request
30?
is for $11,760,000.
So you got 19 and 11?
No, sir. No, sir. Of the original request that we put in for 19, we were actually funded 11.
11. And then you said of the 11, 4 went to renovations of a. So you
existing
really
building.
have a net of 7 somewhere now. Has that 7 been spent?
Yes, sir. We built a smaller building at that time.
Okay.
Now this is just a continuation of that original request where we didn't have $12 million to
So
finish
this
out the
request
classrooms.
being short of $12 million is going to accommodate or be part of the $7 million smaller building? Is it?
Well, the $7 million building has been completed now a year ago.
Sure.
So this is for an additional building to finish out that original space that we were requesting.
All right, thank you.
think
Representative Royal.
I think I may be able to add a little bit more light to that. I was around then, and the building was twice the size that the recommendation in the budget was for. We got into the Budget Conference Committee, and then Lieutenant Governor Mark Taylor removed funds for half of the other building. The building disappeared from the radar after that, and we've had to go back and try to resurrect it. But they built a much smaller building. They have great needs for it. We have great private sector participation in our nursing programs. They have an RN program down there now. We have a shortage statewide of healthcare professionals, and this classroom building is needed as greatly as any physical plant in the state of Georgia. Probably more than one Mr. Parham's talking about.
Mr. Parham, would you like to argue? Any questions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Glad you're here.
Thank you.
And since I have Dennis Kelly with Zoo Atlanta, I'm going to call you forward for 3 or 4 minutes, please. Try to hold it down. I'd appreciate it. And then Fort Valley State. Once again, I apologize that we didn't get it, but I'm glad you're here and waited for us. Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Kelly, we're glad you're with us, and many of the members of the committee went to see Zoo Atlanta, last week, week before?
That's right.
It's quite a visit, and we appreciate you coming. I told you that we would give you an opportunity to talk, and glad you're here.
Well, we appreciate it. Real quickly, in about 3 or 4 minutes, we have an interesting opportunity for an investment by the state in conceptual design on 2 projects. A new animal hospital to replace a 20-year-old animal hospital that was actually built inside a renovated lawnmower shop, as well as conceptual design on the Georgia Trail, an exhibit that we would build that would feature all the terrestrial animals of Georgia, the highlands, the Piedmont, and the longleaf wiregrass habitat, as well as the Okefenokee Swamp. We think both these projects will return an investment. We're seeking help as the most successful public-private partnership in the state of Georgia, we think, to create an investment opportunity and prove a return on investment for the state. Very quickly, the animal hospital, we already have a strong partnership with the University of Georgia, Georgia State University, Georgia Tech, as well as private universities like Emory, Morehouse, and we see an opportunity to expand that partnership through a renovation of our hospital to bring in technology to be able to share our exotic animals with students at these institutions and to deal with exotic issues like avian flu. Zoo Atlanta has the only board-certified avian vet in the state, and by collaborating, building a hospital that has the technology, for example, to send digitally radiographs of radiology across the state to other students, we think we can enhance the state and continue our leadership there. Dr. Maria Crane is with us, our head vet, a University of Georgia graduate herself. If it wasn't for the University of Georgia, Georgia State, and Georgia Tech, we never would have been able to get our giant panda pregnant. It took that collaboration of all of those institutions and their scientists working with us to make those gains. And we think by this appropriation of $300,000 to study an animal hospital that incorporates all these educational institutions and possibly more, including the vet techs programs at 3 universities, as well as the Georgia Trail, we can come back and demonstrate to our donors a tremendous return on investment, and again, in a very strong public-private partnership. So we thank you for your consideration. We appreciate your working us in, but we think this is a terrific opportunity. We'd love to entertain any questions.
Any questions? I've got some comments here real quickly. When we went to the zoo a week or two ago, some of us went. One of them disappeared, but it was quite incredible to see the new panda. This is a once in a lifetime type thing, I believe.
That's right.
Because they don't exist that often in the world.
There's only 1,500 of them left on the planet, and we're the only giant panda born outside of China this year up until the end of the year. So yes, it's an incredible accomplishment for the state of Georgia to be entrusted with what the Chinese say is their most precious asset.
And one other comment relating to the aquarium. We had Jeff Swanigan in early this week, and he spoke of the number of people that have participated, attendance, and the like. It's just blown out of the water, their estimates. And this is a destination point for Atlanta to make Georgia a better place to come and see, and Zoo Atlanta is one, and I hope that going forward, regardless of your request, that we can help, we as a legislature and the people of Georgia can help Zoo Atlanta also be one of those world-class destinations.
Thank you.
In time.
We appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. You know, already students from 142 of the 159 counties in the state come to our zoo as part of their education program. So we think we're a critical part of the education program already for the entire state.
Yeah. Any questions? Mr. Parham, my dear friend from Millersville, do y'all have any pandas down in Millersville?
No, but we're working on it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you. And now, last but not least, one of our only two, for the new members on this committee, only one of two land-grant universities in the state of Georgia, Fort Valley State. And sir, I apologize. You have to introduce yourself, but we apologize for not getting you in, but now we have, and give you a few minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. My name is Larry Rivers, and I am the president of the Fort Valley State University, and I took office this past March, so I've been in office now about 9 months, 15 days, and about 7 hours. And this is my first time to have an opportunity to appear before you, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that. My happy task today is to introduce to you our facilities request, a badly needed academic classroom and laboratory building. We have great strength, and we have a serious problem. First, Fort Valley State enjoys a heritage of strength in science and research that stretches back nearly to our founding 111 years ago to 1895. Many of you will be familiar with our strong reputation in agriculture and agricultural research, something greatly enhanced about a half a century ago by the designation of an 1890s land-grant institution. What you may not know is that we have earned a solid reputation producing professionals in the sciences, especially in healthcare fields such as medical doctors, dentists, and veterinarians. We do not have a terminal degree in these fields, but our undergraduate science and agricultural programs and our Masters of Public Health program have furnished and continue to furnish countless students to top quality professional schools. Here is the problem. Virtually all of our laboratory facilities, most of our classrooms were constructed long before innovations in technology, teaching methods, laboratory design were implemented that most schools now take for granted. Plus, we do not have a single lab designated for graduate studies. Simply to maintain a competitive position while affording our students a solid education requires that Fort Valley State develop comparable, up-to-date facilities. This problem is about to be compounded. Over several years in recent times, my university's enrollment has slipped. I often say that now it's a new day in the Valley, and I'm proud to tell you that this is true concerning our enrollment. As of last fall and the doubling of our freshman enrollment, the slip now has only been stopped and it will continue to increase. This semester we have maintained our enrollment, and we will experience during a time that perhaps some other universities during the spring experience a slight decrease in enrollment, we will experience an increase in enrollment. We intend to build upward from there, especially now that our education preparation programs are back on track. I might add that the classroom and laboratory building will rise adjacent to our new $44 million residential village, a 6-building complex that will come online late this summer, and let me make this clear, at no expense to the taxpayers. That further will enhance our ability to recruit top quality students. Clearly, if we are already experiencing a critical problem with the lack of smart classroom and up-to-date laboratories, that problem will only mushroom. I am very pleased to tell you that the Board of Regents has recognized our dilemma and has given high priority to the construction of the academic classroom and laboratory building. Governor Perdue likewise has endorsed this request enthusiastically at the level of $16.8 million. Your support now will guarantee that thousands of students over the coming decade will have at their disposal quality facilities. This will allow my university, our state of Georgia, to produce highly capable scientists, healthcare professionals, and others dedicated to serving our state and the people. Let me emphasize to you that the Fort Valley State University is prepared to move immediately to finalize planning for construction of this building. Our goal and our hope is that it will come online for students and faculty by the fall of 2009. I brought with me the handouts that you have for further details. Let me close with these thoughts. This is critically needed. This is a critically needed facility at an institution poised on the brink of substantial growth. Your support will result in the creation of quality learning and research space that will facilitate our efforts to serve highly important segments of our state society, economy, and particularly healthcare. Tax dollars will be well spent. This proposal has been thoroughly vetted and endorsed up and down the line. Given this, I respectfully request your continued support for Fort Valley State by asking your approval of requested funding for our academic classroom and laboratory building. I truly endorse this academic classroom and lab building, and I hope that you will continue to keep it on the list and fund it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rivers. I'll ask a quick question. I noticed your design drawings. How in depth is that? Are you ready to move on the work?
Well, we have had the BOR graciously gave us some money for the pre-concept, and we've done that. We're waiting for a contract from the BOR to continue with the final stages of that, and then we can move straight on into construction. So we're well on the way with that.
Another thing, private money. Any foundation private money involved in the project?
No, since this was a classroom, basically a lab, we didn't particularly go for any outside funding for this.
Mm-hmm. All right. Representative Floyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Rivers, we appreciate the job you're doing down at Fort Valley. I was with you this summer when we had the groundbreaking.
Yes, sir.
Now just about the completion of the facility there in Vienna.
Yes, sir.
We're looking forward to y'all being part of our educational process there in Vienna. And we're also proud of the fact that y'all are involved in the helping us with the shrimp program.
Yes, that's one of our stronger.
Real instrumental in trying to help with the freshwater shrimp.
Right.
We appreciate that. Y'all have done a yeoman's job down there in the way of agriculture, and we appreciate it.
And we'd like to invite each and every one of you to come and have some curry goat and some shrimp and some fish. I mean, you come down and see what we're doing at Fort Valley State.
The most honorable John Yates.
I couldn't let it pass, being a Griffinite, to not recognize Rayfield Wright
Yes,
of your university
Yes, sir.
being put in the Football Hall of Fame this
Yes,
year.
sir. Yes, Rayfield Wright played for the Dallas Cowboys for over 13 years. 70, was just recently inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and we Wildcats are extremely proud of him. And we also named a street coming into the campus Rayfield Wright Drive. So we're very proud of Rayfield Wright.
I used to see him play in Dallas, and we named a street for him in Griffin.
So he's got quite a few streets named after him.
I had another comment.
Yes, sir.
I grew up in the peach business. My family did, and back then, and still today, Georgia's called a peach state. But you don't see any peach trees. Do you have a large number of peach trees in Fort Valley, Peach County, or?
Great question.
And more particularly, what does Fort Valley State do in regard to the peach business in Georgia?
Fort Valley State is moving into research on peaches. And one of the big issues is that it is becoming increasingly harder to grow peaches, the diseases, and so a lot of people in Peach County are moving to pecans now because it just seems to be a lot less stressful. And so I've encouraged a group of citizens working with members at Fort Valley State to look at the whole peach industry and to see what we can do to increase production of peaches as opposed to cutting back on them.
Well, I would love to help you there because I have a strong desire and love for peaches. And rarely have I heard anybody say they didn't like peaches. And when they say they like peaches, they got a great big smile on their face like I do right now. But
and we have to continue to grow peaches if we're going to be the Peach County, right?
We're called
the Peach County, so we got to continue to grow peaches.
The two representatives in this area, Lenmore James and Tony Sealing. Okay.
And
glad you're here with us. That's great.
Go Wildcats. That's right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And members of the committee, if you'll hang with me just 1 second. Next, and by the way, what time is it? We're 3 minutes ahead of time right now, but I just wanted to tell you that Monday and Tuesday we need to get together We're going to have to get the supplemental budget out probably by Wednesday, and with a vote on Thursday at the latest, and go to Green Door on Friday. So hope that you'll pay attention to your mail, and we'll get together for 15 to 20 minutes to go over the supplemental budget, maybe 30 minutes, sometime Monday or Tuesday. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Rivers, and thank you, committee.